Commission. Today is November 13th, and it is 6 p.m. We will begin with a roll call of the planning commissioners. Oh, actually, sorry, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance given by Commissioner Jensen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioner Shin, will you start the roll call for us?
Yes. Adam Shin, no conflicts.
Melissa Kendall, no conflicts.
Daniel Gonzalez, no conflicts.
Lisa Jensen, no conflicts.
Jonathan Hill, no conflicts.
Andrew South, no conflicts.
Barbie DeSoto, no conflicts.
Jeff Whitlock, no conflicts. Although this is a public hearing, only the presenters and those invited by the commission may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on. When speaking, be sure to speak into the microphone so that the record is clear. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Please limit side conversations as they interfere with the audio recording. If you need to have a side conversation, please step out of the chambers. Please do not attempt to interrupt or speak over others. Intimidating or threatening speech or behavior will not be tolerated at any time. Please refrain from clapping, cheering, booing, or being otherwise disruptive during the hearing. Thank you. We'll begin our hearing with item number 1. Development Services requests a general plan amendment to adopt the Northeast Neighborhoods Plan as an appendix to the Provo City General Plan, Riverbottoms, North Timpview, and Sherwood Hills neighborhood.
Thank you, Commissioners. The Northeast Neighborhood Plan has been a long time coming. The residents of these neighborhoods have historically been very proactive in the planning process, and they're very much looking forward to having this plan. So we're excited to present it to you today. This plan started off like most plans do, with an open house and a kickoff survey to understand the needs of the areas. What we've gotten from this survey was concerns about road safety, wanting to see green space preserved, and a lot of discussion about whether the area is growing too fast at the right speed or too slow. The planning process was similar to any of our other neighborhood plan processes. We've had the kickoff meeting. From there, we created our technical advisory committee, which was residents from these neighborhoods. We met with the committee 11 times. 5 of those meetings were discussed solely future land use for the area. Outside of the meetings, our committee was given drafts to review, give us feedback. They got the final formatted draft on September 23rd, which we haven't heard any additional feedback from them about. Obviously, we presented it to you at the last study session. And after that, we got additional feedback from our Parks and Recreation Department and then posted it to Open City Hall so additional residents could provide feedback. Through the drafting process of the Northeast Neighborhood Plans, we came to these 8 objectives that we felt highlighted the concerns and the desires of the neighborhoods while aligning with the general plan and those goals. We'll go through not all of them, but we'll go through these pretty quickly. The first objective is to understand and identify the land use needs and desires, especially relating to the residential, commercial, and open space uses. This is a common goal in neighborhood plans, and it basically summarizes the purpose of the plan. In this case, one of the needs that our committee felt was something to identify the development difficulties in the foothills and sensitive lands that exist in the project area. One of the desires was to highlight the recreational opportunities, the green space, the trails, the open space that they have. And with regards to residential housing, there was a lot of discussion about where housing should be, how should we address it, where should we add density, and where can we preserve the neighborhood feel that's been so important to the residents. Going along with that, the second objective is to preserve the area's strong presence of single-family home neighborhoods, local urban agriculture, public access to natural spaces, all while identifying areas for infill development aligning with these neighborhood qualities. So as you can see on our future land use map, to the mouth of the canyon, we are proposing an area that's MDR. Near the shops at the Riverwoods, we have a mixed use infill moment that allows for commercial and residential areas. Down directly adjacent to the shops at the Riverwoods, we're proposing HDR, and then we have several areas of LDR and additional single-family housing. Something unique to this plan is the hatching tool that hasn't been used in any other neighborhood plan. This was to provide a balance of showing that the agricultural uses that currently exist are welcome and encouraged to stay there as long as property owners want them, while still letting future developers know how they want to see the neighborhood grow should these agricultural uses change. We feel that this future land use map aligns with the general plan goals of encouraging development of additional single-family developments in key areas. It does promote in a few areas some small infill development, and it promotes in our LDR zones, promoting opportunities for missing middle housing. Our plan also has language encouraging for sale units. The third objective was to identify ways to highlight this area as an important gateway. The Northeast area does have 3 major corridors. The general plan proposes 2 additional design corridors, 3700 North and 4800 North. Both of these have already been highlighted in the gateways plan as well as important gateways to the city. So the Northeast neighborhood plan pulls from the gateways plan and the general plan. It includes language for potential design corridor standards, and it highlights the themes in the gateways plan to create a cohesive look for all of our gateways. Our fourth objective was to update the annexation plan for the area. This process, the 2 main parts of this process were to contact property owners to see if they had any interest in annexing, and work with Public Works to see if it was feasible to provide services to some of this area. So we sent out this letter to property owners to get feedback. Additionally, we reached out to the Springdale community up in the canyon. And from our feedback and our discussion with Public Works, the Northeast Neighborhood Plan is proposing to remove the areas in red from our annexation map. The northeast corner in the canyon is the Springdale community, and then the other areas that are in red are all federal lands that would not be proposing to annex in. The 5th objective was to identify development opportunities and restrictions, including adopting recommendations and best practices from the Hillsides and Canyons Plan to preserve Provo Canyon. Access to and preserving nature has been very important to all the members of the committee and seems to be a common theme for all of the residents. So this development difficulties chapter highlights concerns so that developers can come in more educated when proposing developments in the foothills. They can be aware of the hillside concerns and natural hazards that happen there, and also be aware of current infrastructure concerns and how our Public Works is working to address those. And then in addition to restrictions, we wanted to focus on preservation. The physical environment chapter of this plan highlights the Provo Foothills Trail Master Plan, which proposes an easily accessible and well-connected system of trails running from the mouth of the canyon through the length of the foothills, creating a trail system that is accessible and well-connected, creates sustainable recreation because it discourages the need for social trails and it protects sensitive land. It also brings in the amenity suggestions from the Hillsides and Canyons Plan to ensure that there is a variety of recreational opportunities that are all sustainable. Objective 7 is to explore opportunities to enhance safety and improve multimodal transit and active transportation options. Safety was the #1 concern with this. Our advisory committee brought up areas that were missing speed limit signs or areas where they felt speed limit signs weren't visible. So our Public Works is working to address that by adding or moving speed limit signs. This plan also suggests updating when Canyon Road will be improved with things like sidewalks as they are working to realign it. And it also suggests the improvement of wayfinding signage along trails to decrease the opportunities for trespassing, and recommends trail crossing signage, especially towards the mouth of the canyon, so that active transit users and those driving vehicles are more aware of each other. So the implementation table has a series of goals spanning over 3 phases. Each phase is approximately 5 years. You'll notice that a lot of these goals span all 3 phases. That's either because it's something that should be evaluated regularly, like our hazards maps, or it's something that is dependent on developers coming to the city and proposing rezones. But these goals should meet the objectives of the plan and help the city meet the goals of the general plan. Since presenting to you during study session, we've received some feedback, 2 comments specifically, and today we got an additional 3rd letter. Public feedback that we've received was about typos. It also raised concerns about the ability to enforce accessory dwelling units. This plan does not suggest an increase of accessory dwelling units or suggest any changes to the application process. It merely states that accessory dwelling units are a strategy to add housing while maintaining a single family neighborhood feel. There was also concern raised about the design corridor requirements and that they should not be required on existing homes. The plan states that these are requirements that would be installed as properties redevelop. And then feedback from study session, we've gone through and added word choice, grammar, we've addressed those. And then the other concern that was brought up was the lack of housing diversity. This plan does propose a few areas where we're proposing different densities, and it's staying along University Avenue, which is pretty consistent with other neighborhood plans, where we're increasing density on major corridors while allowing the inner neighborhoods to maintain their neighborhood feel. Are there any questions?
Commission, do we have any questions? All right. Thank you so much for that explanation.
Thank you.
All right. We will now open the hearing to public comments. When your time is up, you will hear a ding and the microphone will be muted. Each person may make 1 comment. If we have questions, we will invite you to come back to the microphone at that time. This time is for comments only. If you have questions about an item, please speak with the staff privately. I'll also note that we've received some letters on this item from Sharon Mehmet and Paul Evans, and another one that was anonymous, and we have read those, and thank you so much for your input. If there are any neighborhood district chairs present, you can come forward and you'll have 3 minutes to comment. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Sharon Mehmet, Northeast Area Neighborhood Chair. I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this. I know it's a huge undertaking, and I really do appreciate it. I went through it. You have most of my comments and they're pretty specific. So hopefully it was clear to understand what I was trying to say. So I won't go over them again. 2 comments that I will make. One is to the reason that I'm late. There's also a neighborhood meeting, not neighborhood meeting, but sort of a neighborhood meeting tonight hosted by UDOT on a part of what's in your plan. So I did ask that we move to later in the agenda, and they said, no, that would take too long. I'm sorry, but that's what I was told. It would change the length of your meeting possibly. So frustration over that. If you're going to ask for input on a UDOT project that's in this plan, don't schedule them the same exact time. That's where I was, being there early so I could be here late. 2, and the other comment goes to that same project similarly, which is not addressed in your plan, is that if we're going to put a light at 5600 North, there's no good reason, in my opinion, to spend the money, taxpayer dollars, whether it's UDOT or Provo City funds, to put that light there when there's nowhere to go across that street. I just talked to those engineers and it was, well, you know, safety. We just chatted about this on our drive down here about, the comment was, if we don't allow a left turn to access southbound University Avenue, we won't have queuing, but if we're stopping with a stoplight anyway, there will be queuing onto Canyon Road. And so if you're going to put that light, if we're going to invest that direction, I would ask that you also put into the plan something that addresses possibly opening the bridge across west of University so that we can access the Riverbottoms neighborhood there better. There's no mention of that bridge in this plan at all. Also, to the comment about the design corridor, the gateway corridor changes wouldn't be implemented unless redeveloped. That wording is not in this document. So I'd appreciate adding that too. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, any other members of the public are welcome to come forward and share your thoughts. Please just say your name and where you live for the record. Thank you.
Mark Sutcher. I live in the Edgemont neighborhood, so just up by the high school. I take Canyon Road down to work almost every single morning. I don't know how many of you guys have ever driven that in the middle of the winter time at 6 a.m., 5 a.m. in the morning, but trying to slam on your brakes to slow down for a stoplight going down that hill, it's going to be a real bad idea. And it causes a lot of accidents. It's going to do a lot more damage than it's going to do good. We might as well be honest why we're talking about putting a light in there is so that we can put a brand new 100-unit apartment complex right there in the corner in the gravel pit, which I think everybody in our neighborhood shared pretty thoroughly last July, how they felt about that idea, that it was extremely negative because we're going to create tons of traffic going in there, thus creating the need for the light. And it's going to cause all sorts of heartache and havoc and everything else with everybody else who's already been here for a lot of years driving up and down that road. Myself, I grew up in the Timpview neighborhood and lived here my entire life. Love inviting people to come live around us and be friendly neighbors, but I really don't want to change the whole feel of our neighborhood at the same time. Like to keep our Provo City, as Provo City has been for a long, long time, a place where everybody would like to live and grow, but grow responsibly. And I don't think adding 100 units in that corner is a responsible idea at all, coming from someone who's lived there his entire life, is also as a contractor. I understand and realize what it takes to put in a unit that size and what kind of impact that's going to cause at that intersection. It's going to be extremely detrimental. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bryce Valinga. I live in the preserve neighborhood just off Canyon Road. And I hadn't heard of a bridge, but I wanted to propose a bridge. So that's great that it's already been mentioned, but being able to access the Provo River Trail from that area up there, I think would be fantastic. It seems that especially when we have a lot of youth trying to access that and crossing University Avenue, it is worrisome for parents. I've heard of the development going in there. I haven't heard 100 unit. I heard maybe a 13 or 15 unit townhome. I don't know what's going in there for sure, but I agree if it's 100 units or high density, then that's not a great idea, especially for a light at the bottom of the hill right there. I would like to see continued access to the trails going up through the hills there. And for whatever developments happen there, that we allow access to those trails. Another thing that I didn't see mentioned in this plan is there's not a lot of public transportation for the high school. When Provo High School was on University Avenue, those students had access to use transportation to access jobs and stuff like that. I don't know what they have now out at the new Provo High School, but that was always an issue with Timpview High School. The students weren't able to go out and do like on-the-job training or something like that. So I'd like to see something in place for students to access public transportation, to be able to use release time to go in the community to work. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further comments, we will now close public comments. The commissioners, what are your thoughts on the item?
If I could clarify a couple things, so that'd be all right.
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner. Director
Mr.
Pepperoni.
Mr. Day is here with engineering, so I'm going to talk about engineering, and if I get something wrong, David, please come up and correct me. It's my understanding that UDOT's plan for light at 5600 North and a T intersection with Canyon Road at 5600 North. That's been on their plan for a long time, and that was on their plan before any development at the gravel pit that's been referred to as proposed. The current plan for the gravel pit is 16 townhomes, and I think it's a light there. The need for light there is completely independent of that project. That's a long-range plan of UDOT. As far as a bridge across the river, when the townhouse development was approved a couple years ago, it's under construction now. Engineering and planning did have that development preserve a right-of-way through the townhome development so that a bridge could be put in and connect to the other side of the river at 5600 North as it comes across. That very well may be true that that's not mentioned in the plan. Ms. Smith may be right, but the plan for that has been memorialized by the city, and the plats that they gave us, the right of way for that was preserved. So we agree that that's a good idea. That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Pepperoni.
I have a couple thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So my wife and I live in this neighborhood district. We live just south of the Riverwoods ourselves, and I used to work in the Riverwoods Office Park for a few years. So I've been around in this neighborhood for a while. It's a place that we were interested in coming to live. And one thing I appreciate about the plan is the discussion about preserving open space, the parks, the trail. I think those are really important. And so I appreciate those are called out and those are mentioned. It is a unique aspect of this part of town. A couple thoughts I had reading over this plan that I'm going to try to put into words. Is the question of growth and the future land use and kind of where we're headed with this part of the city and what the overall vision is. So looking at like from the very first page 1, you can see that this district of the city has, started off, years ago, it was uninhabited. Pretty much it went from that to being agricultural when people started coming to farm the land, agricultural to, low density residential, to the state where it is now, where there are, predominantly a lot of single family homes, in the area. And so I wonder about our attitude and our thought on the future of where this continues to go. Part of what I think makes this unique is that there is a large commercial hub here. We have the Riverwoods Office Park and we have the shopping center, and these are our things that we look at as important parts of our economic hubs for the city, right? And I think it's safe to say that we assume that those places will continue to grow and there will be more demand for people to come to work and to shop and to live in these kinds of places. On the other hand, it seems that a lot of looking at the land use, the future land use plans and the growth plans, what we're looking at here with this plan is essentially saying that we don't really want much growth to happen here. And looking at the plan, I don't think that we have enough. I don't think we're planning for enough housing supply to fill the demand that is going to be continuing to come here in the coming years and decades. And that becomes something that's not just, it goes beyond just this neighborhood. It becomes a citywide question of, if there's not enough, housing built to meet the demands of a growing office, an office park and a shopping center, that population demand is going to spread throughout the rest of the city. And that becomes it becomes traffic problems throughout the rest of the city as more and more people have to commute in from farther, and from outside the city even, I imagine. I think if you want to look at an example, you know, in my mind is to look at Lehigh, where the very strong sentiment among people, I think, living in Lehigh is that they want to maintain the feel of where they moved into. They don't want, you know, drastic new changes, drastic new development happening. At the same time, if you go and talk to people, they're the top concern among people in Lehigh is now the traffic problem, the fact that they have people commuting in from all over the valley. And that, you know, I think that it's worth noting that we can, you know, we are making a choice when you choose that, you know, and it's a choice, I think, between do you allow population growth in the neighborhood versus do you know, do you choose by default more traffic and all the, you know, all the side effects of that. You know, looking at the future land use, it looks to me like there's really only a couple of areas that are zoned or that are planned to be zoned for any kind of, you know, like real population growth. Most of it is planned to be left as is. It's probably like, you know, it looks like single digit percentages of this neighborhood district that are expected to have any kind of, you know, anything beyond low density residential. Medium to high density is just a few small pockets. And I think that, you know, this is, I believe, the first neighborhood plan to come down the pipeline since we had the new city general plan passed, right? Or one of the first at least. And, you know, with our city general plan being to talk about infill development as a key strategy, it feels to me that there's not really many provisions for that here. To the comment earlier about, you know, things like 100-unit, you know, like big high density units going in, I think it would be a lot easier from a city perspective to say that we, you know, we recognize that that can be disruptive and that changes things, but it would be easier to, you know, to open up if we had the opportunity to say that we could do other kinds of smaller scale infill development, you know, I don't think there would be so much development pressure to have these big, you know, big units going in on just a few small, you know, a few small lots here. You know, I think that it's important that we think about our housing strategy and what will happen if we don't, you know, give an eye towards growth. And I think it would be unfortunate if housing continues to become like a scarce luxury in a place where people come to work and to shop and where there's demand to live. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I totally agree with a lot of your points, Commissioner Shin, especially the point about the market demanding. The market demand is for housing where those wonderful amenities are, the access to the canyon and all the things that people enjoy. And I totally agree that it would be so much better to have some small incremental density more broadly than have those chunks of the high density as well. But it's kind of a situation where it's like either or. And I think I really liked the comment about the bus for teenagers, but that's also something that I feel like we just talked about being sort of irreconcilable, having sprawl where transit doesn't make sense versus having some densifying, some natural growth where it'll make transit more feasible. And so those are the choices before us. I also would have liked to see more specific, I don't know how specific this plan is supposed to be. I know it's just a plan, but some more detail about what kind of infill, you know, would this neighborhood be willing to take? The whole city needs to take this kind of infill. I live in Grandview, and I live in a very sprawly neighborhood as well. I'm totally fine with infill myself, and I don't recommend anything that I wouldn't have in my own neighborhood, in my own backyard. So that was something I would have liked to see. And I also want to say I think these plans are a good opportunity to look at our streets and the street sizes if we're concerned about safety and street safety of children. Having really wide streets everywhere is not going to be the good thing. And I think these plans would be a really good opportunity to go for. I would hope that people realize it's an opportunity to really push for much more human scaled streets that keep that small neighborhood feel even when you have densifying going on. It actually makes it much more charming. I was just up at a friend's house up in the avenues and I took pictures of the houses behind hers because she lives in a little like 1,700 square foot 1910 house or 1905 house. And the neighborhood is beautiful because things are human scaled. And I would have liked to see some more, neighborhood friendly street planning, including the sizes of the streets and some other things like that.
Thank you. Commissioner Jensen?
Okay, since this is our turn to discuss, I made a list of things I love about this plan and things I don't love. There are more things I love than I don't love, just for the record. I love how it addresses the critical hillside ordinance, how it talks about the natural hazards and the natural resources and protecting and preserving those. I love the suggestions for removing some of those properties from the annexation plan and simplifying that. I like the suggestions for safety and wayfinding. And the things I don't love are the very limited LDR, MDR, and HDR, despite the fact that this entire corridor has a huge arterial bisecting it. Like, I feel like we're not saying that we're going to plop down apartment buildings in the middle of all the neighborhoods, but we are saying that there's a giant high traffic corridor, and that's a really logical place for higher density housing to go. That would provide a mix. If you look at page 3 of the staff report under the general plan policies, under land use 1C, one of the goals that they're using from the general plan is to promote neighborhood scale development in residential areas, including a mix of density, such as pocket neighborhoods, missing middle housing, and a small lot family, single family. If we even consider the least invasive of those options, which would just be smaller lot, single family, you still have the same single family subdivision feel, but you're getting more people in that space and giving more people the opportunity for home ownership, which is something that is being promoted throughout the entire state right now. In the conclusion of in the staff report, page 5, the last sentence says that this plan helps the neighborhoods to grow while preserving the values and character that the neighborhood residents cherish. And I feel that this plan does this disproportionately compared to the other areas of the city. These other areas recognize they needed to provide space for land uses that weren't their favorites. All these other area plans had to compromise their desire to preserve their typical character of their neighborhood. And they had to balance that with the greater needs of the city as a whole. And I feel like this plan doesn't do it as well as the other ones did. I kind of feel like this is the equivalent of, for example, the Southwest area plan saying, we've always been farms, so we only want farms and you can't put your housing somewhere else. So I just think it's important for us to remember that though each neighborhood in the city does have a distinct feel and we want to, in some ways, we want to keep it that way, we need to make sure that each neighborhood is sharing the burden of providing for the needs that are outlined in the general plan for the entire city. This is the great example of that is that we say we want to have public transportation access all these areas of the city, but if we only have single family housing, like Barbie said, then we're not going to have public transportation that's feasible in every area of the city. So I just feel like there's not enough give and take. And I love almost everything about the plan except for the sparsity of diverse housing.
I totally agree with that. That's something I'm glad you brought up because I agree. I have observed since I've been on planning commission that there's an attitude of protectionism that just I think generally on our side of the freeway, and I live on the east side of the freeway as well, that we say, well, all the new stuff can just go out and use the farmland, or like it's like every neighborhood seems to have that, but this is disproportionate compared to other neighborhoods. And I do think that honestly, some of the most charming and valuable neighborhoods that I've seen, like as I mentioned, the avenues are ones that slowly built up in increments the density that they have. They added, maybe they made a larger house and then made it into 2 apartments, or the small things like that, but they end up being the most charming, unique neighborhoods, really. And so I think it's unfortunate, just the resistance to accepting that people need homes. I would really like to see
we have
more responsibility that way.
I live in a single family neighborhood that is buffered by townhomes on one side and apartments on the other. Has an arterial going through the middle of it, and it's logical that the higher density is closer to the arterial than the lower density. We have a property nearby my house that recently went up for sale, and we were so excited because even though it's a single family neighborhood, we were excited to see the possibility of like a cottage home, you know, like the clustered housing that we've talked about as a tool for getting more single family homes in less space that I don't feel would have detracted from our neighborhood to have the density increased in that particular spot, but it would have been a great way to have infill development that would actually have improved the neighborhood by having a higher density on a low, very small lot size.
Those cottage little communities are adorable, and I would have loved to live in something like that as well.
So thank you so much for that discussion. I have a couple questions actually just for the city. So first of all, there was a lot of really good notes in Sharon Mehmet's email. Were those, a lot of them were just kind of like consistency typos. Were those incorporated?
Since we just got those today, we haven't had time
Okay.
to go through and actually change the plan yet. We did look through the comments to know what they were addressing, but yeah, we haven't had time to make those edits in the plan itself yet.
Okay, I'd recommend, some of these seem just like tidy cleanup,
Yeah.
not necessarily changing the intent but really good feedback. So just curious, one point in that letter about why private trails were included, just out of curiosity.
So we actually pulled that figures directly from the transportation master plan. So it's already in our other master
Okay.
plans. I don't know why it was included there, but that's just where we were getting that information from, is plans that have already been adopted.
From the transportation master plan? Okay,
Correct.
thank you. I also have another question just on this comment that was made about the townhouse development. Is that the same property that we previously had a review, we reviewed, then there was concerns about sewer?
No, this is
The gravel
no,
townhouse
this is
development?
I was referring to the townhouse development on the west side of the river.
Got it, okay.
The Ryan Smith development that was associated with the 3 office buildings.
So that's what you're referring to when you said 16 townhouses?
No,
the
that
16 townhomes
that
are on the
is
gravel
the-
pits.
Okay, yeah.
Gravel pits
And-
by the substation.
And that's the same one that we reviewed an application earlier for
When we were
66 units that had concerns about the sewage capacity.
Right.
Right. The
yes.
previous one was for 66 stacked units.
Yep.
We're going to see a new proposal for 16 townhomes.
And that'll come before the planning commission, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to close the loop with the gentleman that that'll be an opportunity to speak to that later.
And I also remember when we talked about that item, that they're realigning the proposal for 5600 North. UDOT is proposing to realign the road so that there isn't so much of a curve coming into the intersection, right? And that would be incorporated with whatever development gets approved right there.
Chapter 4 of the physical environment, we do include a diagram that has the Canyon Road
Okay,
realignment.
that's what I
that
remembered. Thank you.
Addresses some stacking concerns, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? How are we feeling?
Maybe just a question for staff also about this notion of development potential or increased density potential along, what areas, as we're looking at the current land use plan and some of the things that are stated in this revised neighborhood plan, what kind of feasibility do we see for, additional density in some of these, the better locations where we have that, we have the access, we have the area.
Right. I can definitely see, based on looking at the future land use map, where there is some concern because it doesn't highlight some of the existing zoning. There are areas along University Avenue, especially directly adjacent to the shops at the Riverwoods, that are already zoned MDR, or they're a pro zone that allows higher density units. Those aren't at a state that would need redevelopment, so we didn't propose additional land use changes for those. There's also a handful of, like, directly adjacent to the shops at the Riverwoods, there's a special development that's a townhome development that is higher density. So while the future land use map does look very sparse, there are existing areas of higher density opposed to large lot single family that also does exist there. But especially as these areas continue to age, we firmly think that the next neighborhood plan can propose a lot more small scale cottage homes, things like that, as these areas get ready to be.
Or more
redeveloped.
redevelopment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at this point, it's just that there was not a land that is not built out and land that has not really aged to the point where
It's
proposing
recent
redevelopment is
development.
feasible.
It might be useful to have, if you feel that the actual on the ground reflects more of what we're describing than what we see in the plan, it might be useful to have the images in the plan reflect current and future land use so that you can get a vision for what it would look like altogether.
Yeah, we do have the current zoning map, but the zones, they are pretty small. It can get kind of confusing. They're not very well labeled. So I think adding some.
Could do like a
imagery in
blowout
there.
in the areas where there are opportunities, maybe.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, we can do
just for time, because we have 9 items on the agenda. Is there anything? How are we feeling, commissioners? Do we feel like we need more discussion, or are we ready to, you know?
Just one more comment.
Yeah.
If I may, this notion of trying to share opportunity for additional development, especially if we're looking at increasing single family densities, these pocket communities and things. It feels like that's something that we'd want to see more broadly in the general plan, not just in a neighborhood plan. This is the kind of thing that we need to argue for and promote and include throughout the general plan as a whole. So,
And in code changes, because a lot of what is prohibitive for some infill things, like I went to the planning conference and there were some ideas they said, and they said had a grid and it had what kind of infill did the most to make housing affordable.
yeah.
And it was usually the most controversial, but the most successful ones would actually bring down the price quite a lot. But all of those things are prohibited. Like I used my lot as a thought experiment and said, okay, what if I sliced off the back of my lot, which is too much land anyway, in Grandview, because of the side yards and the setbacks and all those in the max lot coverage, we wouldn't be able to do it. But if those were alleviated, someone could build a really nice 2,400 square foot house with a little garden in the back, And so it goes beyond even just the plan, but I think that it would be really nice to look at what those goals are for housing affordability and really try and promote those changes in the code so that it's possible for people to actually do incremental development.
I think where I'm at is I feel hesitant about there's some of the language in here comparing the neighborhood plan here toward the city general plan. So like the city general plan, the top 3 housing strategies: 1, promote a mix of home types, sizes, and price points; 2, support zoning to promote ADUs and infill development; 3, recognize the value of single family neighborhoods. And I think that there's some of the language in here to me feels like we're focusing on 3 at the expense of 2 and 1 in the general plan. For example, there's a mention that in this plan it says MDR, so medium density residential projects, should not be located within existing single family neighborhoods. They must be placed in strategic locations with good access to arterial, and collector roads. I think effectively that, because of how heavily low density residential everything is in these areas already, that kind of effectively says no meaningful infill development, And to me, I feel like that's a, I struggle to reconcile that with our general plan goals and the ideas that we're trying to, because I think, there are goals that we are talking about here in the general plan, things like infill and missing middle, those are called out. And to the extent that they are called out, it feels like there's a disconnect here with what I'm seeing here and what I'm seeing there.
Right. The protectionism is at odds with the achieving those 2 goals of housing, of, increasing the housing stock and variety and affordability.
Are those concerns such that you're thinking you would not want to forward this as a positive recommendation?
I think for me, yeah, I'd feel strong enough about that to forward those concerns to the city council instead of a positive vote. I'm also curious to know if anybody else, what everybody else is feeling. I've already said my thoughts.
I agree.
I agree with Adam too, but that might just be 3 of us.
I tend to agree with Adam and Commissioner Jensen and Commissioner DeSoto.
I feel like there's enough good here that we get it moving. And to staff's point, we have got other iterations we can do. This is one shot out there. This is going to give us a runway of 5 years or whatever. We're not going to fix all of this right now. And we need to do it from the top down, from the general plan, and then have that permeate into our area plans. We're not seeing enough of that already. We had some discussion about that 2 weeks ago. So I'm not sure that holding this back is going to help that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where my head is at too, although I agree with a lot of the points being made. It's, this was made by the neighborhood themselves. There was this TAC that kind of was consulted. Sounds like there's a lot of support for it. The thing that I don't really understand, to be honest, is just like kind of the interplay, because once this plan gets codified, how does it affect future policy changes that would come from the general plan and stuff? That's something where I feel like maybe some training on, because I think this is one of the first plans that has been done post the general plan rewrite, right? Just kind of understanding how it's used functionally would be really useful for us, I think, for future.
Well, I think we've used plans functionally before, so maybe that can help us imagine when we've had projects in the Southwest area come forward. Even the Southeast area plan we've used a lot. And we've compared the goals in those plans against the development that's being proposed. And that's helped us to support or work against what we see based on the goals that were set.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
And I think that's why I worry about this, because if the goals that are set here don't seem equal across the board, not that everyone should have the same goals, but it doesn't, to me, feel like they've taken the needs of the whole city into account in making their goals, whereas it feels like the other areas had to. We said, you have to take some of this burden, you have to put this in your plan, and there was give and take, and they ended up taking more than they wanted to in their goals, but there was a compromise. And so I'd be afraid that we would lean too heavily on it like we have on the other ones and say, well, this is what it says, so we don't have to worry about that here. And
so
it would kind of set a precedent just by us using it.
For example, someone kind of like one of the items we have later today says, I'd like to, split my lot, create a smaller unit here on a smaller lot. And we say, oh, this is a great plan, but actually it's not in this neighborhood plan.
It doesn't align with the goals of our neighborhood plan. So maybe this isn't the right project for this area.
I agree with that. I think that's the problem, is that if we really do want infill, and like I said, when you look at what people want to live on that side of town, people want to live there because the amenities are nice. That means that people, there's a market for infill. And I think that excluding one neighborhood from absorbing any of that, while the other neighborhoods have to absorb, is not really fair. And it's going to create, I think, a lot of imbalances artificially.
So I have a few comments.
Yes, please.
I agree, Jeff, that this is a good plan and that the neighborhood had input on this. So I like that. Lisa, we've had issues before, remember, where we've found that the general plan is in conflict with each other, items 1, 2, and 3. So my question is, there's a lot of pressure for 1 and 2. When do we stand up for 3, and how do we protect 3? How do we not just slowly let 3 fizzle away, which is single family neighborhoods?
I think we get so much pushback. I've never, we get so much pushback whenever we talk about anything besides, okay, let's think about the Buckley Draw property. That one was really, it blew my mind, because people said that was going to be a shanty town. People said that was going to be a mess and things. And it's going to be really nice. It's going to be out of my price range practically, And so I think that, I don't know, I do think that the pushback that we get is number 3. The pushback we get constantly is that. And if the code also is the pushback, and then the neighborhood plan is the pushback, we have no rationale for ever saying yes to anything that would alleviate housing prices and make it so that people can own homes. I think that's wild.
Well, and I've said before, I don't think necessarily that we are alleviating housing prices. I mean, we're building things that people still can't afford. It's high density, but they still can't afford it. So we have a problem in other ways.
But there are ways, and infill is one really incremental infill that is naturally, like the traditional city development is a way to help that. A big part of it is getting the financing away from national trends and making it localized. And there are strategies that exist, but the thing is that if we set up everything for those efforts to fail, then we will not even be able to absorb just regular old growth.
Yeah, I just think it's okay to say there are certain places and areas where it's all right to leave it as it is, legacy family neighborhoods.
I agree. And my neighbors probably would agree as well. I mean, I'm in Grandview. I have a lot of people who want Grandview to never, ever change. But all of Provo is changing. All of Provo is going to change somewhat. The point is that no one neighborhood or area should not have to absorb anything while others absorb the rest.
Well, I think the challenge, actually, Commissioner Jensen, you wanted to say something?
Go ahead, Sarah.
I think the challenge is, and this gentleman who talked about the 100 unit apartment complex, and there's an item later on about that, is when you don't allow small incremental infill development, you create a tremendous amount of pressure to do these massive mega projects that are 100 units, 150 units. And I think those end up being quite disruptive to communities, as some of the letters suggest. So I think like some of the feedback that I'm hearing on the commission is not to say these neighborhoods should come in and all be duplexes or triplexes or have massive apartments. It's basically saying like, could they go, one level down the zoning so that instead of, half acre, quarter acre, you could have, a 1,500 square foot lot or 15,000 square foot lot or 12,500 or something like that. And the general plan as it's currently written seems to suggest that like that would be something that could be easily denied. Am I summarizing the feedback correctly? What are your thoughts about that, Commissioner?
I think the city has some goals, and some of it includes maintaining single family neighborhoods. And so I think we need to respect those ideas as well and balance it. And you've got 1 and 2 against 3.
Yeah.
And they are in conflict often. And I think we need to be very cognizant of balancing it, and public input and neighborhood desires need to be part of those decisions. And the city says we do want to protect that. So we're not going against the general plan by saying, yeah, this is good. It allows for some changes in places where, there's still open spaces. You could say, all right, here's a plan. Does everybody agree with this slightly increased density in this particular plot as an infill? I don't think it changes that. But as far as the pressure to build 100 unit, we can say no to that. That's in our control. So
Can we just, I wish we could strike 100 unit off the record, because that's a little bit of a misnomer.
It's a bit of a
because it
hyperbole,
was 66.
Yeah.
We had a clarification from
It was
Director Pepperoni that the development contemplated was 66 units. And even since then, it's been revised downward to 16. So that, this is the type of incremental change you're talking about that helps pave the way for that.
But the point still stands, for example, that there's a lot of examples in our city where we've had very large developments go inside of where I would not call it the next incremental unit of development.
Sure.
Whereas it could still be single family, just with smaller homes if you did infill. And that's what we're talking about, is that so often there's pushback even against that. I don't know if you remember the ones off of 500 North by Timpanogos Elementary, where people were like, this is going to be terrible because 2 more homes were being built with maybe a 1-bedroom ADU underneath. And it's really, as far as density, that was not a big step up at all, but we still got so much pushback. And so I think that's the thing, is that we can expect the pushback, but is everything else also, are we also setting ourselves up to fail by everything else we're allowing to go forward?
Director Pepperoni.
I believe in every neighborhood plan that we've adopted, every plan has said, we're going to allow for more density in these areas. in order to preserve the feel and character of other areas and not change those. That's happened in every plan. Now, if what the planning commission seems to feel is that this plan is not going far enough, then send that message to the city council. But to me, a lot of work, a lot of effort, and a lot of good is accomplished by this plan, has taken place and is accomplished by this plan. To throw the whole thing out or deny it because you feel like it hasn't gone far enough in this area would be unfortunate.
Because we can still forward a positive recommendation with the note.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I really want to get through more of this agenda. So was anyone willing to take a motion and we,
I
oh,
just
you
have
had
a-
a comment.
Yeah,
I don't
and I
wanna-
was actually going to say exactly what Director Pepperoni said, but my question was, if we feel more strongly that we want the residential aspect to be addressed, is it better to say, yeah, we'll forward this, but please pay attention to these notes? Or is it better to say, I would not forward a positive recommendation? Like a vote of 5-4 or something, or 4-4.
That's a judgment call for the planning commission. Be out of my place to tell you which one.
Right, but I'm just wondering if we,
The
I don't,
stronger message
because
is
I'm not
always
trying to
vote a
shoot,
negative.
I'm not trying to shoot the document down. I'm just trying to say, I don't think it's perfect yet. So that's where I don't want to send the wrong message by a vote, one way or the other. I don't know.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do, Commissioner Gonzalez.
On item number 1, Development Services requests a general plan amendment to adopt the Northeast Neighborhood Plan as an appendix to the Provo City General Plan, Riverbottoms, North Timpview, and Sherwood Hills neighborhoods. I recommend that we do not approve proposed Northeast Neighborhood Plans to City Council.
So do not send a positive recommendation to the city council to
Correct.
approve it.
Could we add a comment about the concerns that were brought up with that?
You need to do that.
And I would add to that that the plan on the basis or not recommending approval is on the basis of further addressing a commitment to diverse housing options consistent with the general plan throughout the city.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, and just a reminder, the double negative can always be tricky. If a nay would be, you would actually vote in favor of a positive recommendation, and a yes is a negative, because the motion on the table is a negative recommendation. Commissioner Shin, could you start with a vote?
Aye.
Nay, and for the reasons that I stated, I think this is a good plan.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Hey,
Aye.
I'll vote nay also. So that is, I gotta do some counting. It's 4-4.
So that
4-4.
that means you are not forwarding a negative recommendation, but you're instead forwarding a positive recommendation? Does it actually negate itself when you have a negative?
Is it a new motion because it
Oh,
tied?
the motion fails.
The motion failed.
The motion
right?
failed, yeah.
But anytime the planning commission is deadlocked, then the item goes to the city council with a negative recommendation.
All right. So the motion was deadlocked 4-4. Okay, we'll move to item 2 and 3. Thank you.
So in this case, the negative recommendation is actually the positive recommendation.
Only from your perspective.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we know what message is going on.
I feel like we should have worded that the other way. It would have been easier.
Yeah, it would have been a little bit clearer, but on we go. All right. I'd like to read in item 2 and 3. These two will be done together. Tyson Reynolds requests a zone map amendment from the R181 family residential zone to the MDR zone in order to construct a 100-unit apartment building located at 2000 North Canyon Road. And then Tyson Reynolds requests concept plan approval for a 100-unit apartment building in a proposed MDR zone located at 2000 North Canyon Road, Pleasant View neighborhood.
And Nancy Robinson presenting it,
And
but let me give
thank
you
you.
some papers. Okay. So, the current, let's see, let me just forward my slides. So the current legal use is an R18, so single family homes in an R18 zone. On March 27th, 2024, the Planning Commission approved grading on slopes over 30% on this property. So there was a neighborhood meeting held on December 7th in 2023 about this property, but the application was different than what's being presented here in 2023. At that time, the neighborhood discussed a rezone to campus mixed use with a building height of 75 feet and a 101 unit apartment building. There was also a meeting held on July 17th of this year, 2024. And that was regarding a new proposal that he's asking for, which is medium density residential, which is single family residence, 100 units, and it's a maximum of 45 feet for the building height. Some of the concerns that were brought up in the July meeting was the change of the developer's plans, whether there was sufficient parking, the slope after the grading was done, and the possible increase of traffic on Canyon Road. You might remember that when we talked about grading of the slope, that the current topography is a concern and presents challenges to Provo City Fire Department and utilities. Also, just kind of go through these slides. As you can see, it's got several different MDR parcels near it with on the east and west, the residential, single family residential. The developer has proffered a development agreement that would run with the land, committing to improvements in the local sewer system that would be worked out with Provo City Public Works. And this upgrade would be intended to accommodate the increased demand from the proposed development and improve system reliability for the surrounding area. Then with the concept plan, one thing to note, the plan notes specify 100 units, but when you go to the illustrations, it's actually only showing 93. And I can give you the breakdown of what those are between 1, 2, and 3 bedroom. The required parking for the bedroom count is 201 for off-street parking spaces, and the submitted plan includes 240 off-street parking spaces. As for the staff analysis for the rezone and the concept plan, the staff is encouraged to reference the questions asked on page 45 of the general plan. And if you want me to go over any of those specific questions, I'd be happy to you. But just as a conclusion for the staff, I just provided you with that letter addressing the municipal council budget priorities for the fiscal year 2025. And the first one listed is to increase homeowner occupancy by 50% or to 50% by 2029 through a balance of home types. And this proposal that we have today aligns with the adjacent land uses. For sale housing is a stated priority of the municipal council, and whether there is to be for sale units and to what degree it remains unanswered. The commitment to the sewer system improvements and the approved grading along the eastern boundary will help mitigate impacts on neighboring single-family residences and support long-term infrastructure needs. Staff is comfortable with the zone change from the R18 to medium density residential in terms of scale and housing density. However, with for sale housing being a stated goal of the municipal council and the issue being unresolved, staff has hesitancy with the recommendation for approval. Additionally, any approval should be subject to a development agreement that memorializes the proffers made by the applicant and that acknowledges that currently there is insufficient sewer capacity for the proposed project. I don't know if you want me to go through any more of the slides. The pictures are in your packet.
No, I think that's fantastic. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, Commissioner Jensen.
If there's insufficient sewer capacity, why would the applicant want to move forward with the plan? Like, how do we go about approving something that's not even feasible?
It would be with the understanding of that
That they would
development,
have to pay for those
the
improvements?
development agreement.
Okay.
They've,
My biggest questions are about what we approved with the grading before. I remember that it was something that was gradual and we didn't feel like it would be undercutting the hillside. We liked it because it brought down the higher density to the same grade as the other higher density uses, and it felt like it was separate from the neighborhood up on the hill anyway. But what I'm looking at now looks like it's a giant retaining wall with the slope having been cut through, which I'm not as comfortable with. So can you explain what it looks like on paper or on the ground?
well, since what you have is just a concept plan, I would refer to engineering to be able to give you a specific on what they would require and what that would specifically look like.
Okay.
Yeah, so if David wants to answer any of those questions regarding specifics.
I have two more questions about the height of the buildings being.
Sorry, Lisa, one more thing
Oh,
on that.
Aaron.
Sorry.
And Aaron can help.
Also, the project plan, if the zone is approved, the project plan would be coming back to this group where
Okay.
you would
Because
have those
it's big
details
enough?
at that point. We don't
Okay.
have those with the concept plan.
Okay, I
something
guess
like
I'm
that.
just moving forward with the assumption that the way this is laid out looks like it would require a retaining wall. And if
Right.
that's already something I'm concerned about, I would be less likely to
Right. Fair
let
enough.
it move forward.
Thanks.
Okay. The 45-foot high buildings, how high is the hillside itself that's currently there? Do we know? Like, I'm assuming it would be kind of close to curb grade, maybe 3 to 10 feet above, but what's the actual height of the hill that it's
I-
Right
compared
now,
to?
it's a lot higher than
Oh,
that,
wait,
30, 40 feet.
I was going to say, sorry, I am totally going through the the things in the wrong way. I'm pretty sure we had a diagram. I thought we had a diagram that showed the, where the current slope exists, but the developer might be able to answer that question
Okay,
specifically.
I can hold on to that one then.
Okay.
My last question is more about procedure. If a developer proffers a development agreement that says, I'm going to make these for sale units, does the city go about monitoring that or overseeing that beyond just the first sale? You know, like we say, okay, you can now have your certificate of occupancy because we see that these were all sold. But then beyond that, how does that continue on so that it doesn't become a rental property instead of an owned property?
Yeah, that's a good question that probably would be better answered by Aaron or Bill.
Okay.
So one of the things we would do is we would have a requirement with the city that when the unit changes ownership, it has to be owner occupied for the first year or 2 years, whatever we decide on or agree to. That keeps the institutional purchasers who are going to buy it only to rent it out. It doesn't guarantee that they're always going to stay owner occupied. Just like your single family homes that you live in, we can't guarantee will stay owner occupied, but at least it has initial owner occupancy and it chases out the institutional investors who are buying rental units.
Okay. So for the first year, does the city actually follow up on that? Or is it just based on somebody saying, hey, my neighbor's renting and I know that's not allowed? Like, how does that initially get enforced even?
Well, usually just on the mortgage side, it's enforced just practically, because as long as it's owner occupied at time of purchase, you can't get another loan typically until you've occupied your house for a year.
Even if it's just a city ruling and not actually recorded with the property at the county?
I'm not saying there wouldn't be anything reported. We have to work through that with the city attorney, but I think there would be something recorded.
Okay, so there would be
There's
some paper
essentially a
trail.
Type of deed restriction. There'd be a
Okay.
type of deed restriction.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
what I'm saying is just practically, unless you are buying the next house in cash, you're not going to be able to get another mortgage.
Okay.
All the questions? Is that all the questions?
I have a question. So there was in one of the community letters we have brought up, there was mention of concerns about an easement for a canal that goes underneath the hill above street level. I think this was brought up,
It was
if I recall,
last time.
last time earlier this year. And I'm just wondering if we should try to clear the area and understand what's going on there. Is that something that the city is aware of? Do we need to like, what is the owner of the property, the developer aware of that? Can we get like clarification on that?
From my understanding, engineering is aware of it, and it would probably also be a good question for David to answer.
Okay.
Looks like we have a couple questions for you, David. Do you mind speaking to the canal question and then the retaining wall question? We'll probably ask the developer a little bit, but would be great to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts.
Okay. It's working.
Yes.
Okay. So the canal, yeah, that is the Timpanogos Canal. We're aware of it. The developer's planning on accommodating that. And if his plan moves that at all, that's his expense to move it in a way that's satisfactory to the canal company. So that supplies the majority of the irrigation water to BYU.
But we typically don't solve issues like that on a rezone concept plan stage.
Okay.
And what was your other?
The retaining wall question that Commissioner Jensen asked.
Yeah, so the back of the building would be a retaining wall. It would slope down slightly. This new MDR plan is quite a bit smaller than the one you saw previously. It doesn't go as high and it doesn't go as back as far. So, but that whole slope would be, I think, a very nice looking slope that would be landscaped. There are some renderings. I didn't see them in this presentation, but they're part of the package that was submitted by the developer.
What would the height of the retaining wall be from the ground level of like, you know, how high does it go?
I don't remember the exact measurement, but when it's at the back of a building like that, you really don't see it. You just see the building, and then above the building, you'll see a slope. So all of that kind of disappears into the hillside.
Would the rear windows of the building then be looking directly at just a small
Yeah,
space to the wall?
So at that level, there would be no windows. And I think that's, well, the developer can answer that, but I think that's the parking garage that nestles back against the bank there.
Okay. Do we, from an engineering perspective, do we feel confident? Are there concerns about like long-term seismic issues, stability of the hillside, the things that are, you know, the residents are concerned about backing up onto that property?
No, it's a superior type of material, a rock and sand, so it's very stable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. All right. I'd love to have the applicant come up and give their presentation. You'll have 15 minutes for your presentation. When your time is up, you'll hear the ding and the microphone will be muted following your presentation. If the commission has questions, we will go ahead and ask them.
Thank you. I'm Rob Reynolds. I'm owner of the project or the property that we're discussing the development on. A couple of things I wanted to mention to you is one of them is the basic slope right now, as I recall on the thing, is at 53 feet. Plus there's an existing 2-story pitched roof house on top of that. The existing R18, if we were to build on the exact top platform, will put you about 30 or 35 feet above the top of the existing unit. Existing units are 45 feet from the lower elevation. So after we remove roughly 53 feet of material, then the units will be built and go up 45. So it'll be less than the existing top of the hill, excluding the 2 existing homes that exist there now. The grading that was previously asked in the last presentation has not changed. It's the same grading elevations that was previously approved by this. We didn't change the elevations at all. Now, location of this building set is the back part of the building, which that lower level in the back part of the building would probably be more parking. So it would, but above that, we're not planning to go into the toe of the hill far enough that will affect the views, if you will, of the people looking out, other than they will be looking at the slope 2-to-1 type elevation. The engineer that gave the soils report said I can actually grade it at a 1.5 to 1, which means steeper I've elected in the design to do it a 2-to-1 so that it is less sloped, comes out further than what the soil engineer said I could actually go to due to the nature of the material that's there, because it's a granular borrow that's on site. So as I look at the plan from what I previously designed, even though I like some of the fandango-ness of the previous project, is I think this is more conducive to both sides and the things around it, being it's lower than the existing hill exists now. And it brings the elevation down to where, as far as view and separation from the single family homes to the rear, it's separated by elevation, and it matches more clearly the elevations on the properties to the north, the south, and the west, rather than if I was worried about a seismic, I'd be more worried about a seismic event the way it is than a seismic event. So I think by doing it, we're reducing the overall exposure and the steepness of the existing slopes that exist on the property, making them more consistent and conducive to long-term success. Another thing that we've done with this is to hide the majority of any kind of parking, even though we have put more parking in here than required. If you look at that rough drawing as in the concept ways, that parking in the middle of that is a parking structure, which does two things for me. It makes very convenient for any occupants. If they're on the second or third floor, they can drive themselves in the parking lot and have their assigned parking entering that level rather than parking, hiking down, hiking back up, or what have you. So the parking that sits in the middle section there, they can drive in, go up to their level, park in front of their unit, if you will, and walk directly in. And so that's the architect's design he was thinking was great for livability of each of these units. So as far as, I hope I answered the question on the retaining wall would not be a separate retaining wall. It'd be part of the construction of the baseline of that back building. And there is still quite a gap between where the back of that building would be and the property line. That distance between the two would still be sloped at a 2-to-1 slope. So the windows, if you're referring to, would be looking at the landscaped part of the hillside. And this is not the final plan. Obviously, that will come back before you. This is the concept plan. But the approval will be based that we can get the earthwork down to a developable state that could further get that information to you. I don't know if that addresses the concerns and some of the questions, or if there's others that may exist that would be advantageous for me to address at this time.
Commissioners, do we have any question for the applicant? Commissioner Jensen.
So just to rephrase what I think you just said, the hillside is a 2-to-1 slope, and the only level that would be below the hillside is level 1, and all the other ones would be above that hillside.
Correct.
And so level 1 is a parking garage on that side, correct, and level 2 is a parking garage only in the middle.
Yeah, well,
okay.
Yeah, all the other, you'll have parking on the first and the center part, but there'll be a ramp going up to the second and that may be some of the disparity that is causing the 93 units versus 100.
Okay.
When we initially did, we wanted to do, I can always reduce units, so to speak. But he said on the best case scenario, I would possibly end up with 100 units. But as development goes on, and depending on what some of the nature of this body dictates back to me as to individual ownership of the like, will kind of dictate some of the density that may or may not be prudent and may affect maybe the front building a little bit, if depending on what makes the most sense.
Okay, I think you were here for the last item where we were discussing housing affordability and housing density. In the staff report, it states that the developer has talked about the possibility of making some of the units for sale, but this has not been definitive. And it also says the applicant hasn't proposed affordable units. And so those are two of the goals that we're constantly trying to match with each other. So my question for you is, how do you plan to address those?
The affordability of units, that's a challenge due to the nature of some of the costs of the development. But I guess in other places I've done affordable units, there's been substantial tax credits and other things given back for such. And I don't know if that would exist on this property or this neighborhood or not, which would bring down prices for some of those things to make them more conducive to to those prices. We haven't discussed that. But by the nature of the size of the units and other things will also could dictate pricing. The bigger the units, obviously, the more cost. And this is not an expensive or not an inexpensive project to build because of design. And I like a nice product and project. And so at times it's tough to give you both a high level project and a low price point. And if I'm going to retain it and I'm going to build it, if you will, or the majority of it or part of it, or whatever the case may be, I like a nicer project because it brings in a higher level of occupants in the essence of management, taken care of, so on and so forth. And I own both types of projects. I've never usually built too many referred to as LIHTC or low income tax credit type places. I have bought some as part of a acquisition, and they haven't always been a pleasant ownership experience because of some of the issues that sometimes exist there. But I'm conducive and aware and open to ideas or other things that maybe create a win-win scenario for what the city's desires are, with the binding, I guess, of the restrictions due to cost and rewards, if you will.
What are your thoughts on the home ownership side of that?
Well, and I'm after a little feedback. Historically, condos have gone through quite a regime of value to no value to value if due to some of the liabilities. I'm being told that some of those liabilities have been legislatively taken care of, so they're not as big of a deal now as they once were. And so I'm open to it. But I think I made the comment as Bill related is ones that I've seen that we've done that, particularly is some at times wealthy people come in and say, I'm going to buy this for my kids to come to school, and they can have, you know, their cousins move in, their relatives, and live in the home. I don't know that maybe I'm too fussy with the way I want it to look and appear. And so I'm after some feedback to see if I can have a win-win solution, help solve some of the issues, and yet still maintain a high level of professionalism, appearance, the other things which I would desire on this project. And so I'm looking for your feedback, I guess, in that direction.
I had a question. I didn't hear the breakdown of how many units of each bedrooms, and I'm glad to see 3-bedroom units because that is great. I think there are families who would be happy to live in this kind of community. But I would like to hear the breakdown of that more specifically.
I don't know that I even have it in front of me. You probably have more than I do.
I have it. So there is a total of, sorry, make sure I've got these correct. I've done it by level. So on the lower level, there's 3 3-bedrooms, 4 2-bedrooms. First level has 9 3-bedrooms, 11 2-bedrooms. The second level has 10 3-bedrooms, 11 2-bedrooms, and 4 1-bedroom. Third level has 10 3-bedrooms, 11 2-bedrooms, and 4 1.
Nancy, would you add those up?
Yeah.
Sit down and add them up and come up later and give those numbers.
I will
to
do that.
That'd be great.
Thank you
Yep.
so much.
And there again, if that's not a huge issue to me in the essence of, I mean, the bigger, the more bedrooms, usually the more cost per unit to do. But I like a mix, and it seems like probably the most common or the most demanded, and some of the other complexes I have in both American Fork and in Lehigh, there's a lot more, most common desired is a 1-bedroom for a newlywed couple or the like, or a young family. And so generally there's more skewed to the 1-bedroom by tradition. And I haven't totally dictated to the architect what I'm pushing for. He was designing by space and what would make the most sense as far as from his perspective. And I was been wrestling more with possible max unit count knowing that it's going to come down from there as we develop it and get it drafted into what we like and love, so to speak.
Sounds
So-
like it's a good mix of
Yeah, no,
of
the
sizes.
there's no question that I'm trying to apply, regardless of how many units are sold versus how many are retained, or maybe they're all sold or what have you, that's still up in the air. But I'm, like I say, seeking a little that direction back from the passion of what the city would like to see. That kind of dictates some of our direction. Main thing I'm looking for now, obviously, is a rezone, knowing that MDR is what I think is the least of the zone. I came in for CMU before because I thought it was the most glorious to look at, even though it didn't meet some of the desires of neighborhood or the like. This now, we're sitting at a less intrusive than the existing hill that exists there, following a similar footprint, but at a lower level, as well as accomplishing services and other things that couldn't have been acquired, both fire. Right now, to even service the two homes from the fire thing is dangerous. The fire truck could have a tough time getting up the existing hill to service the homes there now, let alone if you were to try to develop it further.
I have a question for you.
Please.
Last time, your proposal, I really liked it, positive feedback, curious about what precipitated the change in plan.
Are you talking about the single family?
Correct, yeah, the previous.
What causes it is when I put a pencil to it, there's two things that to get the project going, to get it down to a level of developable phase that was one of my top priorities, because I wanted to get it down to where it makes sense and it's taken care of. Second issue is when I put a pencil based on the ground and what it's going to take to get it there, and the sewer and the water and the other thing, it precluded it from, based on the market, what I'd have to sell the lots for, even to come back with zero gain at a flat. It was upside down.
Got it. And so the sewer changes were needed regardless of the density on the.
Well, no, there is some provision initially for the R18 for sewer, but reality wise, it wasn't, there's sufficient, and yeah, that was a problem associated with, there's a, like even now, if with approval, the only thing I could, if I was going to start immediately, would be able to, until they get the review done of what would be needed to enhance the sewer capacity, the only thing I could probably do is phase 1 or something of it, that there is sufficient capacity. I have to phase it out until we got a design and a figure that would make sense.
Okay. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We're gonna.
I have one question.
Okay.
Oh,
And I
sorry.
also have those numbers.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll end with your
Yeah.
question, Commissioner Shin, and then we'll get the numbers. Then we're gonna move to public
Thanks.
comment.
Okay, just quick question. Obviously the first stage of this project would be to regrade the hill. What would be the time frame for, like, how long would that take
Based on
roughly?
yeah, I've removed a lot of hills like this over my career. I've been an excavationer. We did all the earthwork for the Provo City Temple, and that was much more intense. And obviously this is you're going underneath an existing building. But dealing with the guys that were going to remove it, they were saying with the trucks they have planned, it would be moved in roughly 90 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there are 39 3-bedroom units, 42 2-bedroom units, and 12 1-bedroom units.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Appreciate it. We're going to now open the hearing to public comments. When your time is up, you'll hear a ding and the microphone will be muted. Each person may make one comment. If we have questions, we'll invite you to come back in the microphone that time. This time is for comments only. If you have questions, please speak with staff directly. If there are any neighborhood district chairs present, they will have 3 minutes to comment. Thank
Hello.
you.
Sharon Mehmet, and before you start that timer, I want to know if you got the amended staff report, which included our neighborhood meeting concerns.
We did, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I timed it 3:10. We'll go fast. The staff report mentions the Planning Commission approved the developer's proposal to grade the slope along this boundary in March, which facilitate the transition between the single family and medium density zones. This was given to build the 8 homes, which were then approved for the current R1 zone. The staff report mentions 213 bedrooms specified in the report. She gave it to you. But how close is the developer tied to this building when it begins? Also, he calls out 240 parking spaces. I love that there are more parking spaces proposed than are are required by code. Hooray for friends and visitors. Staff feel that the proposal aligns with adjacent land uses in terms of land use, housing density, and scale. This property abuts Garden Villa and another property to the north. In a recent development agreement approved by the City Council this year, the adjacent property to the north, while zoned MDR, was limited to a height of only 30 feet and 16 units. While the MDR zone change may appear to match, the height of 45 feet usually allowed in the MDR zone does not match the height and density of the properties immediately to the north, and would drastically change the negotiated height agreed to with the neighborhood at the creation of Timp Towers, as Canyon Road increases in elevation going north. After listening to many of the concerns, and since the staff report mentions that the developer is willing to proffer a development agreement, I would ask for a few more items to be added to the development agreement to protect the city and the current neighborhood. One, to park a parking unit per bedroom if MDR is the end zone approved. Since the allowed number of unrelated people in Provo is 3, it's feasible to believe, and I know of multiple already, where 3 bedrooms is 3 unrelated renters, each with their own car, and the third parking around the block. 2, off-street parking included in the price or rent of the units. The neighborhood currently deals with the extra traffic and on-street parking from nearby facilities whose parking is underutilized. One can only guess because they're charging for the spaces so residents aren't using them. And 3, a bond to restore or revegetate or protect the hillside and uphill neighbor and to maintain the safety of the area. For example, a retaining wall, thus protecting the area neighborhood from unforeseen issues that do not allow completion of the project after the grading has begun.
Thank you. I'll also note before the next public comment that we did receive letters on this from Paul Evans and also Dylan Sorensen. All right. If we have any other public commenters, you're welcome to come forward. Yeah, thank you. Please just speak your name and where you live for the record.
My name is D.V. Jacobs, and I have not heard too much because I've got 94-year-old ears.
Hey, that's amazing.
Here's my 2 minutes worth. This is only one facet. There's an elephant in the room because of this project, but it's the 23-mile-long Upper East Union Canal pipeline, which runs from Provo Canyon to Spanish Fork. It's almost entirely comes through steel pipe 7 to 12 feet around. It's a big pipe. It carries 400 million gallons of water a year during the season it runs. Reynolds, we've said this is a problem, and Reynolds have said to us twice last time out that he doesn't know anything about this pipeline or something to that effect. I was there in one of those conversations. But they can't act like this doesn't exist because it significantly impacts their proposal. The canal is there. Homes and apartments cannot be built on top of the canal, and it runs through the area. The canal cannot be excavated under it. It can't be dangling in the air, so they can't carry out the full excavation promised or presented here. This means that Reynolds could only excavate the hill down to the pipeline, which is some 60 feet east of Canyon Road. So the excavation comes down and it's flat, and we have a nice wall along there behind the excavation. And it's 7 feet higher.
Yeah, that's your time, but you can finish the sentence if you want to finish your sentence.
Pardon?
Okay, thank you. That's great.
If I could say one last thing. So the cars, the 240 cars have to be changed from this plan. So what they presented to you is not what they're able to do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate the comment. All right. Seeing no further public comments. Oh, we do. We have one more comment. Thank you, Paul. Please state your name for the record. And we did receive your letters and read them. Thank you for sending those.
Yes, so name's Paul Evans. I'm a resident in the Pleasant View neighborhood. First of all, the grading plan that you approved in March is drastically changed as in this concept plan. And I provided for you some figures that show what that grading looks like. Figure number 4 shows what you approved with the gentle slope over 150 feet. What this concept plan envisions is a slope of 50 feet at 2-to-1. And in order to then reach the bottom of the, it's going to require a 20-foot high retention. And you can do the math on it. It's there in the figures. And conceptually, it needs to be addressed. The canal is pressurized, but the location of the building with respect to the canal has to be conceptualized. It's not shown on the concept plan how that's going to be negotiated. And then finally, 5 years ago, we were here on Timpanogos Towers and the height. And if you'll take a look at figure 8, the idea was because of the upward slope of Canyon Road, we'd have a height of Timpanogos Towers negotiated down to 4.5 stories rather than the initial proposed 6. And that the height of the building would stay along Canyon Road as you went up would look even across, so that as you went up the hill, you weren't going into taller buildings on the right-hand side, but rather the size of the buildings were coming to meet you at the top of the hill to be integrated and infilled into existing residential areas. The Pleasant View neighborhood has the most diverse residential opportunities in the city. We have apartments, we have condos, we have single family, we have it all. And so this is not a new issue for the Pleasant View neighborhood. The proposed 45-foot maximum residential, maximum in the MDR, then negates all of this attempts we've had over the last years to ensure that as we came into Canyon Road, we were entering into a residential neighborhood and not being bumped, not having these high density, higher structures present. So I can answer any questions you have.
Yeah, we'll invite you back up if we have questions.
Sure.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. All right. Seeing no further public comments, we will now close public comments. Commissioners, let's open discussion on this item.
Would it be helpful to have the developer come up and address the canal issue and just explain what his thought process is with that? Because that's been brought up a few times by multiple people. Maybe it would help to hear it from you.
And the height issue.
Yeah, sounds like a great idea. Thank you.
The slope.
Okay. The engineers, the only thing on there is a pressurized irrigation line, which is going to be rerouted. And it is a pressurized irrigation line. It's not a gravity flow canal. And it was actually redone here, man, I don't know how many years ago. So that is planned to be rerouted because it's pressurized. I can lower it in the elevation and it's fine. Move it outside of the building envelope where it's not an issue. And so the engineers have already looked at that, and there is plans and things to reroute that into where it's not a problem, and it'd be rerouted during off season so that it's not a problem because they drain it. I had to shut it off here a few weeks ago when they said they were going to terminate water flow through it. What was the other question? Oh, the existing hill, like I say, is higher than what we're proposing, the existing current hill. That's, if they're opposed to anything, should be opposed to the existing hill, because it's higher than what we're proposing the building to be. But I thought there was one other question that you was going to ask me.
The slope.
Oh, the slope. The slope still would remain the same. If we move the building back, the slope still from the back of the building stays the same. When you take the building, you move it forward, that slope would still come down until, if we're sloping it at 2-to-1, and I've never had it slope anything different than 2-to-1, and he's showing one at 3-to-1. I've never made any comments to like anything about a 2-to-1 slope. So I don't know whether there's some whatever drafters, whatever he's doing calculations, I can't answer that, but the slope is from the beginning to now, it was still sloped at 2-to-1. And obviously if we do a retaining wall into the hill, that retaining wall is a retaining wall. Anything above that retaining wall would sit at a 2-to-1 slope. And some of that is still not finalized yet, but it's always going to be whatever's behind the building is going to be sloped at 2-to-1 because that's the code I've asked the architect and engineering to do, even though I could technically go to 1.5-to-1 per SOL's report. But I haven't done that, nor have I proposed that. But as you move a building back into the hill, that's flat, but anything above that would be at a 2-to-1 slope.
I have one other question that was brought up earlier. And this may be a question for city staff as well. But so if, for example, the hillside excavation happens and construction on the rest of the building is stalled out or halts or canceled somewhere, do we have assurance that there is going to be a retaining wall? The hill's not going to be left in an unfinished state. Like
No,
yeah.
To answer your question, no. First of all, it's going to be a 2-to-1 slope, and if there was no building back in there, it would carry to a 2-to-1 slope till it hit base grade.
Okay. So okay.
But as far as landscaping purposes, if there was something to hold it back, I've also mentioned that I would supply a landscape bond to assure the city of its aesthetics before I started, so that the city would be sure, regardless of possible sewer or construction and the like, that hill would be, for lack of a better word, beautified.
Okay.
So, no, I'm comfortable giving those.
Has there been any discussion on bonding the concern about you do a bunch of earthworks, you kind of on the hill, and then the project's sort of like, hey, that we lost financing or we're going to pause it, market changed, that type of thing?
No, and frankly, I'm not necessarily looking at financing on this project. I'm looking at self-funding it, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
But that's part of the point of, I guess, worst case scenario, if you said that, you'd end up with a landscaped, beautiful park in the middle of.
I see. With
the
this less sloped hill, basically.
Well, no, yeah, you'd have a
'Cause
less
you'd
slope
have-
than
you'd
what you
have a
got now and
slow-
a lot of flat spots.
And you're saying that you're proposing that you would bond for the landscaping,
Yeah,
and that
I'm
would
not-
happen whether the project finishes or not.
Correct. I'm comfortable the project's going to finish and we'll develop it. I just want to make sure it's kept to the level of development building that I would like it to be. But yes, because I'm confident that I have no problem, if you will, allotting or posting a bond for a landscape. I know part of it, some of that hillside, we actually had little walk paths and some little lookouts for some of the design that they alluded to beforehand with some of the proposed landscape plans.
The possibility for the hillside to be taken down and then nothing to happen beyond that has been a concern of the staff since the very first discussion on this property took place.
Correct.
So we've been discussing guarantees by way of bonds to make sure that that's mitigated since this discussion started. That's why he's referring to the bonds.
Thank you.
And also if you look at it right now, it's not landscape. So. it
No,
would be
correct.
landscape.
Yes.
Yes. But yes, that is.
Not the most beautiful hill in the city. Commissioner Jensen, did you have
I have a question for staff.
Okay, I'm good.
One of the comments was that the height of 45 feet should be a graduated height requirement so that the houses stay at the same elevation even though you're going up the hill. And I've never heard that there was some sort of, so that's maybe just a hope that the neighborhood had, but it was never stated that way. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. I know there are times, some subdivisions, the CCNRs in the subdivision that I live in said that average height was, nobody could build above the average height or whatever, 40 feet above the average height. So I just want to make sure that that wasn't actually a realistic expectation.
Well,
Okay.
there may be residents who feel like that's a realistic expectation. I'm just saying that's not.
It wasn't promised anywhere. Okay.
Commissioners, let's have some discussion on this.
I could start.
Okay.
I love that this project gets rid of the problematic terrain. I think that the current use is dangerous it has been said for safety, fire and snow removal and whatever. It's ugly right now, and I see this as getting better either way. It's a good location for higher density. It's close to public transit and amenities, and it's along a corridor that's a collector. Is Canyon Road at that point a collector? Okay. It is a lot of units, and that's my only concern, considering last time we were in love with 16 and now we're talking 100, and it would be 93, excuse me. It would be nice if it was somewhere in the middle, but that having been said, it's still a good location for that many units. And I kind of like that it just has the little arm that sticks out, and then the rest of it is nestled into the hillside. I feel like it is much less imposing. And I love the fact that the parking's on the interior so that the users are more likely to use it, because it'll be more convenient for them than parking on the street. I think it's interesting that Ms. Mehmet suggested a bond for fixing the hill and some things about parking. And I feel like the developer has already mentioned those, and some of those are even covered in here. So aside from the question of whether the density is as many as we want, the developer wants it to be a nicer project, and that will bring in the likelihood of more ownership, but it also kind of takes you away from affordability.
Well, I think the ownership question is still a little unsettled, correct?
Right. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, the way he stated it was, because I want it to be a higher quality project, that makes it more likely to be enticing to an owner, but it also raises the
Yeah.
cost. So it kind of doesn't meet the goals entirely, but it does infill a problematic area. And I feel like it looks like it would be a nice project and it would be done well. So I don't know how I feel about it overall, but those are some thoughts.
Great thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll
Commissioner
go.
Gonzalez.
I share a lot of the same sentiments as Commissioner Jensen. And just to be succinct, the only hang up I have over this is the ownership issues, and not feeling that a rezone in this case supports the general plan and policy objective of increasing homeownership. Yeah, that's all.
To the point.
Something. Yeah, I agree. And I think that the nice thing about this is that there are 3-bedroom ones, which I rarely see in apartments. And I do agree that it's not going to help with affordable housing, but it will help with a certain type of housing that some people will want. I know that this is probably going to attract people who want to be able to ski, go up the canyon whenever they want. And I think this is it might end up being sort of like a luxury type of thing, which again, not necessarily affordable, but not necessarily something we like should shun either. As far as the parking, someone said if every apartment had up to 3 single people with their own cars, that would bring the parking to 246, and they're at 240. And I assume that at least maybe if 3 families have only 2 cars, that would mostly take care of it. So I'm not really worried about the parking, even if worst case scenario, you have single people living here. But yeah, I just think I think it is improving it. And it's kind of the hillside being in the middle or in between this and the neighborhood, that like kind of mediates it a little bit. So it's not like, it's not a building sticking up out of the middle of a neighborhood, you know, and it's sort of a, how else is this going to be used? I have no idea how this would be used otherwise.
Is the building just to the north, the one that the project we approved, that's like the 16 unit that's pre-loved right now? It's that commercial building that's getting built into.
Yeah, that's, it actually was in the development agreement for 14 units.
Correct,
but
14,
with
yes.
the MDR zoning,
Yeah.
to the two properties along Kenyon Road to the north.
Just
till you
right
get
to the north of
2100
that.
north. Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification.
Adam.
Oh, Commissioner Shin.
Thanks. Yeah, I think to address some of the concerns and the points that were brought up from residents and from people in the community. The first thing we heard was the concern about the slope and the retaining wall. You know, I'm not an expert in this. To me, it sounds like it's been thought through, it's been addressed. I feel like, you know, it's not something that's just being, you know, ignored, that there is a need to landscape, and there is a need to build it safely. So it sounds to me like city staff has looked at this, and we feel like we're in a good spot with, you know, structural issues and the hillside. To the concern about the irrigation canal, it sounds like the developer is aware of that and has a plan for what to do to resolve that. So it's not going to be an issue there. To the question of height, I think that with the idea of this concept of the hillside being removed, you know, I'm looking on like Google Earth right now. It's a large, relatively flat hillside. You know, the hill is pretty big and pretty flat. To me, it looks like to build this, you know, you're getting more open air space in that area. Like you're moving, you know, you're not going to have more shadows. You're not going to have more obstruction of your view. I think pretty much like the whole building is below the height of the hillside. So we're opening up like airspace for light to come in if that's a concern, you know. So I think from my point of view, those concerns have been addressed by the questions we've asked.
So maybe the big question is the density right and the rezone right?
On the ownership.
Commissioner Hill, you had a comment?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go too. I mean, I can echo the sentiments that have been said. I really appreciate the neighborhood. You guys always come very informed and show us lots of good information that helps us make good decisions as we look at these. It's good to know that the concerns they brought up are being addressed. I too looked at the hill height, saw that the building height is less than the hill, so we're actually shrinking down, which I think is good and important for the neighborhood. But for me, the ownership, I think, is the biggest question and relates to the density. I do feel like, you know, owner occupied multi-unit buildings is something that's limited in the city. It's a missing housing type that we'd love to do. And so for me, that justifies allowing more density if we can get that in exchange, kind of thing, right? Now the developer specifically asked for feedback on that, on what we'd like to see. I don't know what to give them there. You know, you want to make sure the project doesn't fail because we asked for too much, for example, kind of thing. But what I do know is I would love to see some of these units at least be sold and owner occupied in there. So I'm curious if anyone else has any good guidelines for him or feedback that we can give.
Well, I mean, if we take the city goal very literally, adding 100 of units of renting is pushing us in the wrong direction. So you could go 50-50 and that would keep things. But I think this gets to the question that we've had a lot of just, is this feasible? Is it feasible to have these developments that are half owned, half rented? And that's something where I just feel like I haven't got a deep understanding. I know we've had some discussion at the planning commission on, but I think it's something that, you know, I would even be curious to kind of get your thoughts on, maybe in a minute, not now, but just on like how that would work practically.
I would be curious to know, like, if the developers worked out or looked at any of the numbers, like crunched the numbers and seen like what is the threshold that would work.
I think we obviously always want to get the most out of a project. So along with Barbie's question, why not 50? Why 93? Is it just a price tag or is it really a threshold question?
Just in a minute, I'll call you up in just a second. Yeah,
maybe we're
yeah.
just
We're just
musing
collecting
about it right
questions
now.
and then, yeah.
So
I think it's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, just Commissioner Gonzalez just made me think more about that I was wondering about the number to begin with. And we're talking about a zone change here. We're not just talking about, do we like the concept? And I do feel like it's a good place for that zone, that sort of density to go, but is it the right amount? I don't know.
Yeah, I might be agreeable towards a zone change for that, but on item 3, not recommending approval on the concept plan for the ownership reasons.
So you don't have as big a problem with MDR. You just said you weren't thrilled with MDR as far as the zone change. And I interpreted that to mean that you thought it was too high of density.
No, well, I'm
You're saying if it wasn't if there wasn't a guarantee for owner occupancy, you're worried about it.
right.
Okay.
Like this is like same thing Commissioner Hill said, if there's an exchange of higher density where there's also added benefit of ownership, then yeah,
Okay.
I would support it.
I think when we talked about this a bit earlier with earlier stuff, but I tend to, when we have the opportunity, like every unit that is built here, it may not seem like it's making much of a big difference across the city, but every unit that can be built, for example, on this kind of a lot that's, stacked vertically, more compact, is that's a family or a group of students, a young family, whatever. That's one household unit that is not competing with other existing single family homes in the city. So when we talk about the question of, do we want to say we want to have fewer units, or do you want to put more restrictions on the developer? Like that will this is an opportunity to relieve the housing pressure that could open 50 units instead of 90 here. That means maybe 50 homes somewhere in the rest of the city that are now not being competed over by those same number of people who want to live there. And that affects home prices, and that makes homes more. So like we can build rental units that helps alleviate the housing shortage that is making so many homes go out of reach for people who want to buy them. So there's a give and take, I think, on it's part of this bigger equation.
And I actually agree with that. So to me, this actually solves the problem of the pressure on the single family neighborhoods. These are the right places for these sorts of things to give the housing, to balance those objectives out in the city. So the big issue in my mind for the neighborhood, because they recognize this is the right place for this sort of development. They have these sorts of developments as part of their neighborhood. And this is the right spot. It's the height. But I think we've heard that it's actually an improvement. So I would rather have somebody who's prepared to do this and keep it at 45 feet instead of what was allowed, which is even higher than that in that zone, if we change the zone. So I would actually make a motion to approve both 2 and 3.
You wouldn't do anything on, you're not concerned about ownership?
Well, I think you can put a recommendation that it's subject to a developmental agreement that talks about ownership. And I think the city and the developer need to work that out. I mean, we can, I don't know that we can make suggestions. It all comes down to what can the developer manage and what does the city feel meets the city's needs. So we can throw out 50%, that's great. But
Yeah, I think the
people
developer
make it work.
proffered feedback, so we have the ability to give feedback in this case.
I also think I get that. And like I said, my biggest concern is I don't want to kill a good project over it, right? I do know this is important for the city council as well. And so my feedback to the developer would be go pencil it out and see how much you can offer, right? And then take it to the city council and see what they say at that point.
And wouldn't that development agreement be proffered? Is it at the zone change level or would it be at the project plan review?
At the zone change. It's recorded with the zone change.
Okay. But at the project plan review, we could still have the final nod for what he feels meets that, right? I guess no, because if it meets the code requirements,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because at
As I
that
see why
point,
it has to be
it's by right. If you could come up, please. I would just like to understand a little bit more about how you think about a development that has some of the units owned versus some rented versus all, just if you could share just for our education, like how you consider that. And
Generally, it comes down to numbers as well as comes down to control of, because my desire is to maintain a higher level of appearance and other things. If there's too many, you can try to set stuff with an HOA and some of the other things within units to try to maintain.
yeah, CC&Rs with an
Yeah,
HOA.
And so you can, but as a general rule of thumb, and it may make sense. Some of the calcs of some of this are still, we're only in the concept plan.
Right.
And not to the final plan where I can give hard numbers and what that would be with a full-fledged design. Reason we're here tonight, obviously, is to get a zone change that would allow a project like this, knowing there's going to be modifications to staff. I was asking a question beforehand, is what is the expectation? Obviously, you get 50 to 50, that makes it pretty tough for, and at that point, it may make sense if the market is sufficient
To
to
go
sell them
100 all the way,
Yeah.
right?
And it may make sense to do that. I haven't done the numbers yet because to take this plan from a concept to a final plan is a few $100,000. It doesn't make sense to invest a few $100,000 and have it something that is not
Correct.
feasible.
Aren't we
And-
sort of at an impasse then? If you can't figure out what that looks like, how does a development agreement get proffered that reflects accurately
No,
what's possible?
I have a possible agreement, but one of the items that is left as a question mark on that agreement is the percentage
Of homes that are
for sale. And for that purpose, I have asked the question is what is the expectation or what is a number that
Have
that
you
the
have
city
you
is looking
been
for?
have you been given has someone shared with you the perspective of a lot of people in the city around homeownership? Have you gotten the spiel, for lack of a better term? Because I can give it to you.
I don't know if
you're-
I've got the full spiel. I understand there's a pretty strong emphasis on it.
Yeah, so basically Provo, more than almost any other city in Utah, has more renters than homeowners. It creates a lot of challenges for various reasons. And so the city council, as well as many people on the planning commission, including I think the administration, are really trying to get closer to 50-50. I don't know if anyone knows the current number, but we're quite off of that. It's like 70-30, 10-1 renters to owners. So
not renters,
no, no,
owners.
no.
The approvals
Of
over the
new-
last
of
3
new-
years
of new
have been
buildings,
10
but
to
in
1.
the city-wide, it's 70-30 basically, right? Yeah.
I think it's closer. Isn't it closer to 63-37? I think that was the last number I saw.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, you get it. We're a little
I
bit
get
down.
it.
And then and over the last few years, it's been about 10-1 renters to rental units to owner occupied units approved to be under construction. So we're kind of like way behind that goal. So that's why there's so much emphasis on the city. So when you kind of ask like, hey, I'd like to understand what the city would like to see, I don't think we're wanting to tell developers you have to do this, but I think the context is helpful to understand what the city's trying to get to.
Well, and because it's kind of a unique
Correct,
criteria or
yeah.
desire
Yeah.
that Provo was looking for, that's why I was seeking a little additional feedback, which I've got.
Does that
some.
help that context?
It does. It doesn't really help me go to a number.
I think he's asking just for a number,
Yeah.
and if you asked each commissioner, you'd probably get a different percentage, right? I would say probably 40%.
Yeah, like I think the city council would throw a party if you offered 40%.
I would be happy with any number that was actually feasible, because I have very little doubt, very little hope that you're going to sell it and it's not going to be resold or rented as an Airbnb illegally, even though it's not allowed. And that's where my concern comes in with having so many units, even with the promise of home ownership. I don't know how you regulate that effectively so that it actually creates the benefit we want it to create instead of a nightmare.
And
Aren't
I
they
think
going to
that's
have a rental office? I mean, shouldn't they also deal with HOA stuff and enforcement of all the things?
Mr. Pepperoni has his hand up.
I think it helps. A couple things that really help are, number one, this is the first building that I've seen proposed since I've been here in 14 years that has more 2 and 3 bedroom units than 1 bedroom.
Yeah,
units.
which is
To me,
great.
that Suggests more attractiveness towards ownership. To several of the issues you've raised, to me, the developer needs to maintain either 51% ownership or the whole building needs to be put up for sale.
Correct.
Because if he owns 51% of the building, has a very strong interest to make sure the rules are followed in terms of short-term rentals, in terms of quality of maintenance and all of those kinds of things. So to me, and that's something that he can discuss with the city council, but I would hate to see us push it in a direction that ends up coming back to haunt us in the long run.
Which is why I really like how you phrased it, Commissioner Jensen, about, the number at which is viable and feasible. The community would really appreciate.
No, and I've been working with staff along those same lines, but seeking a little further, and I think I've got several feedback to accommodate what I'm looking at. So if we can work with, I guess, staff, and also you will be seeing it again, and it is approved in its final state, or may not be a final state, but a sub-final state, if you will, based on approvals or changes that may need to be made at that time.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, commissioners, anyone interested in making a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Okay, are we doing them separately?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I make a motion that we recommend let's see, is it a recommendation or is it actually it's a recommendation for a zone change? Tyson Reynolds requesting a zone map amendment from the R1.81 family residential zone to the MDR medium density residential zone in order to construct a apartment building located in the Pleasant View neighborhood with the actually, where is it?
It's on item number 2 in the
It's on page
last
5. It says
Yeah,
page
that's what I'm
6, but
seeing
it's page 5.
Yeah.
And it says additionally, any approval should be subject to a development
There
agreement
it
that
is.
memorializes.
With approval being subject to a developmental agreement that memorializes the proffers made by the applicant and then acknowledges that there's insufficient sewer capacity. And also the home ownership is part of that.
Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. We now have a second. Let's vote on the motion, starting with Commissioner Shin.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
Danae's throwing me.
Well, we didn't ask for discussion on the motion.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have done that. I'm gonna actually go back and can we discuss the motion?
Well, yeah, can you tell us, well, for the benefit of the council on the nay vote?
Yeah, if housing for sale is a stated goal, then working out some of the financial models doesn't require lots of time and lots of additional funds to work out those conceptual models. And I think we got enough feedback here to suggest that we really like the project. We like the location. I think it does add value. It's doing a lot of great things. But I think we just need something in there to suggest that, hey, let's at least go through those iterations to another level before we see it. At least give him some time. We just barely gave him the feedback of kind of what we're looking for. So
Is that something where you would say you want it to
Continue.
come back to us? Or would you say when you go to the city council, make sure you have that information? At what level do you feel like you want to have a say in that?
So I think at a minimum, signaling that to the city council so that they can be looking at it. And to be fair to the developer, giving them some, a level of significance in what we're trying to do here. I think that's what at least for me, that's what I'm trying to communicate. I think it's a great project. I really like a lot of things about it. But if this is a stated goal of the city council and of, we need to figure this out. Otherwise, I think we kick the can down and it waters down the ability to make those changes. So at a minimum, signal that to the city council so they can be looking at it.
And just a question for you. I'm curious. Would you prefer to see us continue it and then come back with that feedback? Or would you prefer just to say in the no vote to give the statement to the city council to catch the attention, to give them kind of encouragement to hold that line before they approve the zone change?
That's a great question. By continuing it, we've given some initial feedback and that gives the developer some time to look at it and to consider that. So that may be an option, but I'm also happy to say no.
Okay. Just a process question. I messed up by not asking for discussion of the motion. Should we redo the vote? Because I stopped it. Okay. So thank you for that feedback.
So can I ask, can we take care of that with item number 3? Can you approve the zone change?
Well, it
And
has to
then-
be This has to be with the zone change.
The development agreement has to be with the
With the
zone
zone
change.
change.
That is correct. All right, so there's still an active motion and we are going to revote on it. Commissioner Shin.
Aye.
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 I specifically because I think the city council will hold the line and look at it.
Nay.
I agree.
I'll also vote aye. The resolution passes 7-1. All right, I am going to, I know it is late and I'm sorry, but we have been up here a long time and I would like,
At least do the concept plan. You have the concept.
oh,
plan,
concept plan.
okay,
I'm sorry,
and
we
then
did not
correct
have the
it.
second. Yes. Can someone make us on item number 3?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I make a motion on item number 3. Tyson Reynolds requests concept plan approval for a 100-unit apartment building in a proposed MDR medium density residential zone located at 200 North Canyon Road, Pleasant View neighborhood. I move that we recommend, or sorry, I move that we approve the concept plan. I move that we approve the concept plan.
Do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
So I don't make the same mistake. Any discussion on the motion? All right,
Just for the record, it's actually 93 units, right?
93 units, correct?
Yeah.
And it's subject to zone change approval.
Yeah, I was gonna add that.
I thought since we already approved the zone change, that was.
We only recommended that
Oh,
the
you're
zone
right,
change be
okay.
approved. So if we say we approve this project and city council denies the zone change, then our approval also disappears.
Okay, thank you.
So just for the record, we're updating that to be subject to zone change approval and 93 units. Let's go ahead and vote since we had a second on the motion. Commissioner Shin.
Aye.
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 I will also vote aye. That resolution passes unanimously. I'll now move that we take a 5-minute adjournment. And just as for people in the audience, we do not hear any items that start after 9 p.m. So we'll come back and try to rock through these as quick as possible.
I know, right?
It's gonna be, a shorter day. I'm good, how are you? There's no planner.
All right, we're going to reconvene in 1 minute. So if everyone could come sit down, that'd be great.
The least.
Did she start that when I said 1 minute?
Huh?
Did she start that when I said 1 minute?
No, it was going for 5.
Oh, 5. Okay.
So it's actually correct.
So we're just missing Alex.
Adam.
Adam.
Yeah, Adam. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Because it's more spread out.
Great.
Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. I just need to, okay, we're going to do items 4 and 5 concurrently. That's correct, right? Awesome. All right, item number 4, Jaxon Allred requests approval of a zone map amendment for the R16 one-family residential zone to the LDR zone in order to add 2 residential townhomes in the back of an existing lot located at 577 East, 400 South, Mazer neighborhood. And then I have a copious amount of papers on my desk. Can I use your item number 5? And then also item number 5, Jaxon Allred requests concept plan approval to add 2 additional townhomes to the back of an existing single family lot in a proposed LDR zone located at 577 East, 400 South, Mazer neighborhood. And Mary Barnes from City will present this to us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Oops. Okay, so got 3 maps here for you. Middle one, area map, just showing kind of where it is. It's just south of 300 South, kind of near, I think there's like a Dollar General in that strip mall right next to it. Right now, you can see in the zoning map, the zone for this property is R16. Like you said, that's single family residential. The applicant wants to rezone it to LDR, low density residential. For those 2 new townhomes, that would be in the backyard of the existing single family home, which is shown on that area map. So the proposed total amount of units on the lot would be 3. You could see in the future land use map, the future land use of the area is residential, and then in your packets, the future land use of the Mazer neighborhood plan is single family residential. I kind of put it in your packets, but technically townhomes are classified or defined as attached single family, which helps around that single family designation. Just to say, if this rezone is approved, the applicant will have to come back for subdivision and project plan application. So depending on what you guys say, what the city council says, this will come back to you if it's, you know, if it's approved. So just a little bit more context of the neighborhood. There are different uses surrounding the project. I specifically wanted to talk about the two blue ones. Just north of the project, there's a Habitat for Humanity, well, it used to be a Habitat for Humanity property. They added 2 units to the back, and they kind of subdivided off. I should have, you know, upped the transparency on this, but it's a little hard to see, but all 3 of those units are subdivided, and then there's common area around. And then down in the south, you know, this southern blue parcel is, it's got a triplex in the backyard of an existing single family home. So it's kind of the same type of similar uses, I should say. Obviously, these are townhomes, that's a triplex, and those are 2 single family homes, but similar uses. There's also multifamily, and there's even more multifamily as you go south in this neighborhood. And I just wanted to mention this came before the neighborhood meeting in September, and all of the feedback there was generally positive. People were just concerned with being able to have preserved green space on the property. All right, so just quickly going through the concept plan. It's such a skinny plan, so I kind of separated it out into 2 parts. First, that blue, the top part over on the right for me shows just the townhome area. So both townhomes, if approved, they're proposed to have 3 bedrooms with 2.5 bathrooms each. Each townhome has 3 parking stalls, including 1 covered parking stall. They are accessed through the alleyway in the back. And I'll get more into that on my next slide. Of course, the alleyway is about 12 feet wide, so that's a bit too narrow for a fire apparatus like a fire engine. So they require 20 feet. So that brings me to the south section of this property, or on the left side. That shows the existing home and where they're proposing to put. They don't currently have a covered parking space, but they're proposing to put it right there, where there's like an outdoor gathering area right now, but that's where they're proposing to put their covered parking space. It's required also. And then you can see that 20-foot fire access going all the way up to the townhomes in the backyard. There is a parking spot for the existing home in the fire access. This was the best possible option. You're not allowed to have any parking in the front yard, so it couldn't be in the front yard. And adding another parking space to the backyard would take away that green space that is so important to the neighbors and to the applicant. So this is really the only option of where to put it for the existing home. The applicant has been made aware that, of course, there's, you know, depending on emergencies, there would be a risk of that car possibly having to be moved out of the way by a fire engine. And the fire department has approved the concept plan. Of course, more details will be worked out in the project plan, but they have seen this concept plan, this concept site plan. All right, the alley access. I took that picture just the other day. So you can see access from the alley towards let's see, that'd be the east side of the block. So there are 2 other properties on this block that, I don't know if, okay, I'm not even gonna press that button. Okay. Okay, it's fine, it's cool. All right, so there are 2 properties on this block that don't have a driveway on the actual public street. You can only access them, you can only park your car in the back. And then there's you know, at least 2 other ones on top of those 2 that also have accesses in the back or garages in the back as well. So this block isn't really a stranger to using the back as the main access or even just an access. Let's see. Other properties use this access road as a shortcut. I think you got all the complaints that that we received the past week or so. Other properties do use this alley as like a shortcut to get to the light over on 400 East. And it is used as a utility road to service those lines as well. It's kind of a multi-use little alleyway. One thing that is really important to Public Works and to Provo and just to staff is that Provo City does not own this alley, and there's no plans to own this alley. It's not improved to a proper public street standard, and it never will be. So Public Works wanted to make extra sure that the applicant is aware that we will not be maintaining this alleyway at all. That means no shoveling, that means no resurfacing. So the applicant, all maintenance must be carried out by third parties. It seems like up until now, the maintenance has been carried out by the property owners that use it. So not an ideal situation, obviously, but it has been working for others and it could work here as well. Provo City Code does state that primary entrances to residential buildings must be oriented to a public street or a designated pedestrian connection. So we put I can't use that. Well, I'll go back. Here. You can kind of see, let's see, on the south portion, on my left, you can see that there's a pedestrian connection that connects to that fire access and then would come down. So that's how we kind of met that requirement. Another reason for the alley access is to reduce traffic on 400 South as well by hopefully redirecting the residents to the alley, the potential future residents of the townhomes to the alley. All right, and then these are the concept elevations, just quickly, and those floor plans as well. Oh, and then, yeah, this is the proposed zone map amendment. You can see the LDR just in the middle there, and all the other different uses that do surround it. So, some of the complaints that we got in included, not complaints, maybe concerns would be a better word, but included concerns on home ownership. We've worked with the applicant and we've let him know that we are very interested in making sure this, if this goes through, that these will be subdivided properties with a common area, kind of like the one just to the north, so that they have the potential to be sold. And then there were other concerns about storm drainage and the effect of construction in the neighborhood, things like that, well, with storm drainage, we would look at that through the project plan and Public Works. And then, yeah, any questions? Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You're fine, don't worry.
I want to know why not just subdivide it and make 2 lots, because then you don't need a zone change. It's 12,000 square feet. You can just cut it in half. You've got 2 lots. Baba bing.
It comes in the flag lot requirements are a little bit
But
stricter.
can't it just go into the back like this one is? If this one's okay to access from the back, why couldn't a subdivision of 2 lots be accessed from the back as well?
I see what you mean. Well, a 20-foot, that 20-foot fire access. So are you saying, like, why don't we just subdivide it like it? Well, it was hard to see in the picture, but the triplex one is its own lot, and then there's another lot in front.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why is that's not technically allowed by current code. To have a lot, you need to have an access, like its own buildable lot versus, it's a different type of lot that I'm talking about with these, but having its own buildable lot requires that fire access, and we'd have to preserve that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so essentially what you're asking for is a flag lot. You could see
Yeah.
they would have the 20-foot post, as you can see through the gravel fire access. But if you're doing a flag lot, you also have to have the 10-foot setback off of that to the
Yeah.
existing home. And there wasn't 30 feet to get that done. So
But the LDR would not require those same distances.
the
So you could
LDR allows this alternative ownership
smaller lots.
subdivision, where you can have the common area, you can have the separate unit on its own parcel. The R1 zone or the RC zone would not.
Okay. I had an additional question because you have to have that 20-foot gravel spot anyway. Why not just have all of them access from 400 South instead of the alley? And then we don't have to worry about the iffiness of alley maintenance and access.
Totally makes sense. So the reason why and that's what they originally proposed. And it was in the neighborhood plan, neighborhood meeting back in September. The reason why is that, well, I wish I could point with this, but so each townhome, each unit on here has to have three parking spots, right? Fitting that parking as well as driveways and proper turnarounds for someone in the eastern townhome to, you know, do a 3-point turn and get out would eat up the entire backyard. So that's
So
why.
you're using that turnaround space as the alley instead.
Yeah, that kind of thing. That's the idea.
I was just so sad because the staff report said that it gave so much common open space, and I'm like, it's not really common open space. It's going to be a gravel pad. There's nothing aesthetic or beautiful about that. So
it's true. Oh, sorry. It's true. Technically it is. Oh, you fixed it. Awesome. Thank you. Technically, without the gravel pad and without the parking being in the back, it would be mostly concrete.
Okay.
So,
okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So the alleyway you said is 12 feet wide.
Yeah, about 12 feet.
So with a 20-foot, I'm seeing a 20-foot parking space, 20-foot parking spaces that lead up into the alley. Does that give adequate space to be able to back up and turn around into that narrow alley? I guess, I mean, there's other cars that look like they're doing it, but they have a bit more space ahead of them to be able to kind of curve around. I'm just wondering, like, my understanding is that generally in like a parking lot, you would need like a 24-foot kind of alley, you know, between the parking spaces to make the clearance to turn. Is that, you know, is there any concern there that cars won't be able to cleanly turn in and out of that kind of not much space to make the turn?
That is a great point. I think probably have to go back and look at that. One thing that could be done is to move the townhomes forward a little bit. It's this trying to preserve green space while also providing for 3 parking stalls for each unit is tricky, but I do see what you're saying, and you're right. If this gets approved in the project plan, we'll be able to more specifically look at the backing up spaces and make sure there's the correct amount, just like you said. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I definitely, I understand that everything comes at a cost of losing some other kind of space. I've looked at similar things myself with other contexts. I'm thinking that it might be hard to back out of. We just might need to like give a little bit more room
Give a bit
for
more,
them to come
definitely.
forwards.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Hill?
Just out of curiosity, what's the ADU regulations in this area? Are they allowed ADUs? How's it work?
Do you know if they're in an ADU? They are in an ADU overlay. The LDR zone does not allow ADUs. Well, they are allowed in single family homes. So technically that single family home could look at it. Is that correct? Yeah. But the townhomes couldn't have anything.
And could they build instead, like an alternative plan, could they build an ADU in the backyard?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
Would it still need the same width for the driveway access and the number of parking stalls and all of that?
The number of parking stalls is only 2, I believe, for a detached ADU, right? Yeah. And then for fire access, I don't even know. Do you know? Yeah. You'd have to look at it with the fire department.
Why is it 2 per, like if it's an ADU, there's only 2 parking spots, and if it's a townhouse, it's 3 per unit?
I think
That doesn't make sense.
So she mentioned the 2, that's a single family home with an ADU on the entire site for both units. You have to provide 4 off-street stalls. So she was kind of assuming there's two existing for these single family homes, so they require two more for the ADU, right?
I think what she was saying is that the townhomes require 3 per unit. So why does a
Why?
townhome require more than the ADU?
That makes zero sense because it's probably smaller than an ADU would be in that space.
And that's the code we have.
Oh, good.
The one that
More-
we're going to
More work to
fix.
do.
All right.
Townhomes are considered single-family dwellings, even though they're attached, they're considered single-family dwellings.
Whereas an
And that-
ADU is not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So you, based on the definition, sorry, I'm just trying to understand. Based on definition, you're assuming fewer people will inhabit it, although in fact, that's not necessarily true. Correct?
Is Jaxon Allred the applicant here?
Jaxon Allred is the engineer and he's not here, but the property owner, Daniel, is.
Okay, Daniel, you going to be presenting to us? Wherever Daniel is.
In the back. He can answer questions. I'm not sure if he has a presentation.
Okay, no presentation. All right, cool.
I have one more question. Sorry,
Yeah.
if I could ask really quick, who currently owns the alley, the access alley?
Great question. No one knows. It's, there's no records
Seems-
at the county. I'm sure if we paid a title company to go and dig through records, it would be able, that would be able to be found. But right now, there's no, we had Chad Hill out, the city surveyor, look at it and he couldn't find anything.
It's been
So,
used for access for so long, it has a prescriptive easement now,
Easement, yeah.
so it's got to stay what it is.
so the owner couldn't come and find a deed from 1845 and say, I'm shutting this down.
Not without a lot of opposition from all of those people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Good to know that's not a risk. All right, let's go ahead and open it to public comment. We'll now open the hearing. to
Do we
pub-
want to ask questions of the applicant? Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah.
Okay, applicant questions. Daniel, can you come forward and we can ask you questions?
I just would like to ask him, some of the questions that we've been asking about, why not this, why not that? Tell us why you chose what you did so that we can understand.
Well, this has kind of been going on for about a year now, but I was kind of like in the same concept that you were mentioning. Why not just divide it in two, right? But there's a lot of codes and regulations that we had to follow to stay in compliance, which some didn't make much sense to me and some contradicted themselves, kind of like with the ADU and the townhome, why are the requirements more or less when it comes to, whether it's a townhome or ADU. But to kind of gain more of a usage of the space, that's kind of what we came up with, to have that 2 townhomes back there and then use the back alley as it was kind of requested or kind of, by the meeting that we had in September. So.
Daniel else have any questions for Daniel?
Yeah, I understand you're the property owner, but what's your relationship to Jaxon Allred?
Oh, he's the engineer that I'm working with.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Are these going to be for sale?
At this moment, no. I would like to personally keep it in my family. I figured 2 more at 3 units in there, have 3 kids. Hopefully in the far future, they could use that, but not a guarantee. So.
Does that mean the plan is to rent them in the interim?
What was that?
Does that mean the plan is to rent them in the interim?
Yeah, as of for right now, yes.
How would you feel about the idea of an ADU instead of the zone change and 3 different units?
I'm not opposed to it. I just, like I said, I want to kind of utilize most of the land back there that is currently not being used, and it's just, not even trying to get maintained. I mean, but it's just not being used.
All right, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
We'll now open the meeting to public comments. So if anyone has public comments, you can step forward to the mic. You've now heard me read that 2 times, so. Please just remember to say your name and where you live for the record.
Either Mike.
Either Mike, you're good.
Michael Davis, Mazer neighborhood. The Habitat property, fortunately, the 2 of the 3 homes are still occupied by the original purchasers through the Habitat program. I helped build or helped renovate the house and build another one. And the other property that was referenced, those back 3 townhomes, they're all being rented out. As somebody who lives just around the corner, I'm very interested in seeing either subdivide and sell or an ADU. I'm in favor of infilling, like we've talked about. But part of the charm of the Mazer neighborhood is all the big trees, like a lot of the downtown neighborhoods. And so to say that land isn't being used at all in the backyard, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. My next door neighbor has paved most of their yard and cut down all their trees. And so I'm interested in the green space and preserving that. As far as the alley goes, people barrel down the alleys. It's a shortcut, like was mentioned. And like my daughter just learned how to ride her bike. She rides up and down the sidewalk, and she's 6 years old. I tell her all the time, you gotta stop at driveways and really stop at the alley, look both ways. She's still learning that. More traffic through the alleys, I'm not interested in that. But like I said, I'm not totally opposed to infilling. So if we can have a moderate solution, I'd be in support of that. The property, I don't know how long Daniel's owned it, but it's been gravel on that side and in the front for years. And I'm not interested in, it continuing to be unimproved. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further commenters, we will now close public comments and move to discussion among the commission.
I have issues with the alley. I have a shared driveway situation in my neighborhood where there's a landscaped area in the middle and everyone's supposed to take care of it and is not successful. There's a couple of those in my neighborhood. And it already sounds like it's just the bare minimum. It's not like it even started out nice and it's going to be neglected and degraded. It already doesn't have pavement and other things. I just don't think that will work well over time. And I don't know how we can approve something that's lacking right of way. I know it has it from the front, but it just feels like we're given a wink and a nod to something that isn't actually legit. So as much as I love the idea of the Habitat property looks so nice from the front and it really improved that little section of the corner, but and I would love for for this to be like a precedent where everyone has a great idea for how they can use the back half of their lot. I just I don't think the few extra trips that are getting diverted to the alley and not put onto 400 South are actually a smart exchange. I think they should be on 400 South and not on the alley. 400 South is wide enough. It's built for safety. And if our goal is home ownership, an ADU seems like a way to avoid a zone change. It's a way to avoid a subdivision. And it's a way to encourage that at least one of those units is owner occupied instead of all 3 of them becoming rentals. So it gives a little bit more assurance that we've got somebody who's invested in the neighborhood, which I think is the kind of infill that we're looking for as people who care about the neighborhood and want to keep it looking nice. So I would love to see something that doesn't include a temporary gravel pad for fire access and a wonky alley that nobody cares about as your only way in and out. So those are my concerns.
Commissioner Hill?
So yeah, I have similar concerns. It feels like we're really trying to cram a lot into a small lot. I'd like to point out the lot that was compared earlier. the Habitat community over there is about 1.5 times as big. And so it fits 3 units much better than I think this one does. We're really pushing the parking width. I was glad Adam brought that up. And, you know, trying to find a gravel pad where a fire truck can fit, things like that. This is one place where I think a single unit back there, perhaps as an ADU, is just a far better option.
Yeah, I wish that the townhomes had the same parking requirements as the ADU, because I think you could orient the townhomes so that if it were allowed, they could all be using the path, like a properly paved path into their garages like that, into this side. They could be oriented toward this way. And I think it would work out a lot better, even for the amount of coverage you'd have. I think it's just kind of awkward. And I'd be more motivated to like it, I think, if they were going to be for sale. But yeah, it's even I, who say yes to so much, feel it's a little awkward.
Is Director Pepperoni, is this whole parking discrepancy requirement between ADUs and townhomes, is this something that's been discussed? Is there any appetite to change that?
Yes.
Because I mean, I really like this. When we talked about this whole discussion earlier today about infill development, like this is exactly what you want to see. It's really great. I do agree though, that if you could just get rid of that dumb third requirement, you could have a much better layout for the whole concept plan.
And
It
more
feels
green
like-
space and less awkward.
So I don't know. I feel, I mean, Danielle's been working on this for a year. And that sucks. I feel like we should be able to come in with plans like this and get it done much faster. Obviously, city staff, you do an amazing job and you're overworked, et cetera. It's not your fault. I think there's a lot of things you balance, but I think that's the regime we really need to see if we're going to actually make a dent in our housing issues. But I mean, if you could wait, you probably could get a lot better product. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Is there a size limitation on an ADU, a detached ADU?
Needs to be smaller than the main house.
And what's the square footage of the main house? Ballpark?
Put up the aerial photo, please.
It doesn't give very good measurements.
I mean, the thing about the ADU is you're losing a second unit, right? That's a pretty big loss.
Well, and and to that, the cost of building an ADU, just with the impacts, I mean, the separate metering and all the infrastructure and everything to get to it, it's really hard to make that pencil, which is one of the reasons why we haven't seen a lot of those. I think we need to do more to make those achievable for people. I don't have much problem with this. I agree that the alley isn't maybe ideal, but at the same time, it's an alley and we're using it for a decent purpose. We're in an area where we've got this kind of density around. I mean, we've got apartment complexes just down the road. I mean, this is the kind of infill, like you said just a minute ago, that we're trying to encourage more of this. And, you know, I'd be in favor of this in lots of areas of the city. I don't have much problem with it.
They just barely put in many townhouses right next to that house, just a couple blocks over. So it's very much in line with the density.
Yeah, I feel like it blends in. It's just a matter of, is it the right way to do it? Do we really want to get in the habit of approving things off of pathways instead of?
I mean, but it's already
if there's a
being
fire,
used.
we can pull the hose in from here, but it's, I don't know.
I guess the thing is though, the fire said they were okay with it, right? Did they not?
They approved the concept plan, but I wouldn't be comfortable saying that they are absolutely okay with it until they approve the project.
Got it.
Because
Okay.
that's where the engineering and a lot more in-depth review goes into that.
And then this, just a question, the current alley is being used as the primary access point to some of the houses, right? Like this one over to the,
Yeah, so you can see, like, for example, this one, they don't have a driveway at all. And so they have this
car lot.
it looks like there's a
That
lot
home
of
looks
cars
very
there.
overoccupied, but anyway, that's not my,
Yeah.
that's not for me to say.
Yeah.
I would like to
And
report
then
an over occupancy.
this one, they also don't have a driveway, and so it's primarily accessed from back here. These people, they do have a driveway, but clearly they're parking their cars back here because they're probably their garage. And then these people, I believe that's also some type of garage, and they've got a little parking spot right there, even though they do have a driveway on 400.
Yeah.
So that's and then there's the one with nothing that's just to the west.
In terms of fire safety, I would, correct me if my reasoning is wrong here, but I would think that, like theoretically, the homeowner could just have like a giant long house that extends all the way to the back of the property, right? Like in theory, they could already have a house that was like that big. And if there's a fire in the back of the house, you just have to take the hose to the back of the house, right? Like, I don't think this doesn't seem like it's a drastic issue, Like usually you only have to have like fire truck access to like the front of the property, then you just run the hose back to if they're, if the fire department feels like this is okay.
I mean, it's
it doesn't
marginally
seem-
different than just the house to the, to the up and to the right. It's like the fire access is about exactly the same as the back of that house.
Okay, you've convinced me the alley doesn't matter.
I have.
You've convinced me.
Okay, well,
I think that
I still think it's too much parking.
Well, that's not something we can address tonight.
That's true.
Shall we do a motion so we can get one more item in?
I think that's a
tonight?
great idea. Just let's do it. Anyone want to motion this thing? We're going to separate them item 4 and item 5 as separate motions.
Well, let's just talk about the density. It's R16 everywhere, but I feel like the neighborhood is conducive to it. There's a couple projects that are similar, and there's a commercial project like 2 houses away.
Correct. That's the
So
Cinco de Mayo mark.
even though it feels like it's a little blip that doesn't match, that doesn't worry me.
Not only that, but what we've talked about, part of infill development as well is having a little bit mixing here and there so that, again, your neighborhood is your destination and there's gonna be less traffic that way. Like they're very close to shops and things. So like, as that area all gets redeveloped and improves, hopefully these will be places where people like to be and like to walk around.
I know why that car lot was there, because of AutoZone being in close proximity. They can just fix those cars back of their house.
Maybe that's what they do.
Dollar General too. It's great stuff. All right, can we do a motion?
I'll make a motion. I make a motion on item 4. Item number 4, Jaxon Allred requests approval of a zone map amendment from the R16 one-family residential zone to the LDR low-density residential zone in order to add 2 additional townhomes to the back of an existing single-family lot located at 577 East, 400 South, Mazer neighborhood. I move that we recommend approval of the zone map amendment to the Provo City Council with the following condition. If approved by the City Council, the applicant must apply for a project plan application and subdivision plat for the project.
Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, see no discussion. Let's vote.
Aye.
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 I'll vote aye. The motion passes unanimously. Can we get a motion on item number 5?
I just wanted to bring up one more thing that we didn't address. One of the comments we received from the public was talking about blocking the sunlight with having these 2 townhomes in the back. And I just, I'm always the sunlight naysayer. I do not think that with the setbacks that they have, that they would block anyone's sunlight. They're not huge buildings. So I just wanted to point out that we'd received that, and I at least am not bothered by it. And this is also only concept plan, so
Yeah.
we could talk
I
about
did
it
some
again.
quick math and it didn't seem like it would be an issue.
Yeah.
We have our sunlight expert here.
Yeah.
All right, item number 5.
Angles,
Sorry, we
maybe.
got to get to this before the 9 o'clock.
I'll make a motion on item number 5 that the planning commission approve the concept plan for Jaxon Allred's request to add 2 additional townhomes to the back of an existing family lot in the proposed LDR zone.
Do we have a second on the motion?
Hold on. Oh,
I'll do discussion, but let's second.
Someone did it.
I did.
Okay, we got a second. Discussion on the motion.
does the concept plan have to be conditional upon the zone being approved? The wording isn't written down here in the recommendation.
You don't need to state that because it kind of goes without saying.
Okay.
But if you'd like to state it, you can.
I think we're okay. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, let's vote.
Aye.
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 I will also vote aye. Item number 5 passes unanimously. All right, we're gonna do the last item of the night. We're getting it right under the wire. Item number 6. Spencer Hymas, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, requests an ordinance text amendment to amend signage regulations for the FC3 zone in section 14.38.080, signs permitted in commercial zones, and section 14.38095, signs permitted in regional shopping center zone.
And let me just say, sorry, if you were here for items 7 through 9, go ahead and go. We'll be back on the agenda December 11th, Planning Commission. So sorry about that.
I apologize, we tried.
Okay. All right. So item 6. So here is the actual proposed language. Essentially, what is being asked for is to move the sign regulations out of this commercial sign 1438.080 into 1438.095. There's a couple reasons for that, which I'll get into. The second part of that amendment is to alter the requirements in subsection D of 095 to change the length of adjacency needed along I-15 and to add the on and off ramps as part of that adjacency allowance. So as we looked at this as a staff, you may or may not be aware that we zoned this area FC3, so you could see all that red there. So those are the only 2 properties in the whole city that are zoned FC3. We did that in an attempt to attract a grocery store or a large retailer to this section of the city. We have been in talks with a large retailer now. Obviously, through your staff report, you can see that. And the request was made to us in early meetings that the signage wasn't really sufficient for their needs. So we talked about different ideas. How could we be a helpful city and get towards those goals that we're trying to get on the southwest and on the west side of I-15. To this end, we came up with, or the applicant came up with this proposal, which staff said makes sense to us, right? So we look at the permitted uses in the FC3 zone, kind of the purpose and objectives of the zone. All of that is very similar to SC3 zone, the regional shopping commercial zone. It's less similar to our CG, our heavy commercial, or our automotive commercial zones. They're kind of different animals, and I think that's why they've been divided into separate zones. So I think with more thought at the forefront of adopting this FC3 zone, we might have already done this, but I think as a staff, we feel like this makes sense. So let me go to the next slide here. So this is essentially what this would produce. As I said, there's 2 properties in the city that have this zoning currently. Though this is a citywide application, it would be applicable at this time to only 1 property, and that's the one on the images now. So the property on the north side of Lakeview Parkway is currently vacant, as you see in the before photo. The retailer would come and install the store there, and that gives you a good perspective of the signage. They've scaled that to the height and the size standards that would be permitted with this proposal. It would be not an electronic sign, as you can see. It's just kind of a flat sign. So that is the request. Staff is recommending approval for the reasons that I've mentioned, but I'm open to any questions you might have on this item.
What that white panel on the sign, the rendering, is that like letterboxing? I'll probably ask that for the applicant. But...
So those are sign slots, as you see in multi-tenant commercial establishments.
Okay,
So those would be the kind of out parcels.
Gotcha.
Through the rest of the
Just
development.
smaller, but not like a letter sign or anything like that.
No, the
Okay.
old section kept to the glass letters.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I
we
didn't.
were hoping that's
We're
not
not
what we
doing
were
that.
seeing.
And when you say it's non-electric, you mean like
It's not proposed to be electronic display sign, like the one across the freeway at the mall. So this would just be a static plastic.
even the gas?
backlit sign.
That would be,
Again, the gas, those aren't classified as electronic display signs,
I see.
even though there's electric, so the prices of the gas could
They're
change.
OLED, but they're not backlit, so they don't classify as.
Yeah, so it's not an LCD or LED
Yeah.
changeable screen. It's
Got it.
yeah.
So are these standards basically the shopping center 3 standards? So what's allowed at the mall would be allowed here signage wise?
Essentially, they would never be able to get as big as the mall because of the frontage and all
Because
the
they don't
different
have enough of the
regulations there.
linear frontage.
All right.
Okay.
And then what's the other property that's FC3 in?
That
Provo?
is on the south side of Lakeview Parkway.
Oh, just these two.
But even with this change down to 1,100 linear feet of frontage directly adjacent to I-15 on and off ramps, that property to the south doesn't have that. They have around 700.
Okay.
So at this point, the only possible installation of a sign of this type would be for this property.
So someone would have to
On the north side
apply
of
for a
I-15.
rezone.
So
Yeah.
really the other red is basically moot below.
At this
south.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could have a sign. It just wouldn't be this tall or big. It just would be more of a monument sign.
Right. Kind of standard pole sign.
If we were to say no to this, is that a big deal for the applicant? Is that a deal breaker for them
I'd ask the
to do
applicant
this?
that.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Ardmore?
Okay, thank you.
Cool. And I suppose the applicant is here. Fantastic. We can invite you up to give your presentation. You'll have 15 minutes and we'll ask you questions.
Yeah, my name is Spencer Hymas, 172 Northeast Promontory, Farmington. I don't have a whole lot to add outside of what staff has provided. They've done a great job in presenting what we're trying to accomplish there, and definitely in the interest of time, eager to hear any questions that I might be able to field for you guys.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Who do you represent?
I represent Galloway. We are the civil engineer on the project for the retailer.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll ask then, yeah, like what's kind of, how important is this to your client? Is it, what's kind of the stakes here?
This is a very important thing for our client. When we were initially addressing it, there were different discussions that we'd had with city staff about how best to go about it. And this was a combination of some different discussions that we had to present it in this manner to basically utilize ordinance that's already in place for signage along I-15. But it is very important for our client. And this is what we felt like was the cleanest way to go about providing opportunity for additional signage.
Any other questions for the applicant?
And I'm assuming this is not a small retail site. This is one of the larger type retail sites. And that signage is enough for a larger size.
Yes. I know that you guys had mentioned about the tenant panels. We don't quite know who will be looking at those spaces at this time, and that's why we left it blank. But yeah, that was the consideration there.
Yeah, Commissioner Hill.
I don't know if this is best for staff or the applicant, but I don't see, and maybe I've missed it, any sort of buffer between the residential zone to the north and where that sign could be. But I'm guessing the plan is to put it at the south end, right? Of that frontage.
What I guess what you're asking is, do we need to make sure that the language reflects that safeguard
Right. Yes.
so that you can't put the sign on the very north end right next to somebody's house?
All right, and I could double check the transitional development standards, but I think there's something in there.
It
to
includes signs
Already
as
there.
well?
include that as well.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great question. All right, I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now open the hearing to public comments. I don't see many people who would be here to comment, so I'm going to close public comments and we will discuss as a commission.
This feels like a lot of the cleanup that we do occasionally when we see stuff that we should have done right the first time. This does not feel like a change. It doesn't feel like a favor. This feels like when we made this zone,
That was
2
the
or 3
intent.
years ago, that was the intent, was that it would make stuff like this possible. And I have absolutely no problem with this.
Has this project already been approved or is this?
No.
No, okay.
But this zone used to be agricultural and we rezoned it 2 years ago, I think, to invite something like this to an ideal location for it. So I'm glad to see that it's working.
Yeah, it feels really like in line with the intent of the rezone we did and just kind of an oversight, if anything.
I did see one thing in the language, Mr. Ardmore, on page 5, 14.38.095. Signs permitted in the regional shopping center zone and the FC3 zone. Shouldn't you have that? Since you're crossing it out in the previous section, don't you want to add it to the words of the second section? Yeah, okay.
I'm excited to find out who the mystery retailer is. Yeah, cliffhanger for next time.
It's Walmart. They revealed it. Not just kidding. In the rendering.
I'm ready to make a
All right,
motion.
yeah, can we do a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Jensen.
I make a motion that we forward a positive recommendation to municipal council for item number 6. Spencer Hymas requests an ordinance text amendment to amend signage regulations for the FC3 zone in section 14.38.080 and section 14.38.095.
Thank you. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's vote.
Aye.
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 I will also vote aye, which means item number 6 passes unanimously. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Amazing. Any second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are now wrapped up and finished.